Hello and welcome to the BNB show. My name is Brandon. That's Brendan over there here joining us again from Seahawks Brendon Nelson's channel. And I really do appreciate him jumping in here. We've got a chance to feel good about this show a little bit more than even normally. We always usually feel pretty good about our team, but we feel extra especially good about our team today, don't we, Brendan? We got a playoff Seahawks team. That feels pretty good to say, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean there was a time when it seemed like it was a given, but this last month, I think a lot of people had kind of given up on it, and now here we are. So it feels great.
Yeah, they made us sweat, and we had a lot of confidence about mid-year. We are like, oh yeah, I mean, we're thinking maybe Super Bowl like run, but now they definitely brought us down to earth a little bit. Great to see though that the team was able to fight and scratch their way out to getting that win as they did this last week, Brendan. And we will be folks today, kind of going all around the world, I'm sure, between looking back on this game, a little bit to the future of San Francisco. I will of course be on Brendan's channel on Thursday at 8 o'clock, so we will be doing a preview of the Niner game at that point. But it wasn't the prettiest games, Brendan, but they did fight, right? They did show a sense of resiliency, and they kept at it even when it wasn't easy all the way around, offense and defense. So I thought the defense kind of carried the day in this one. What were your thoughts on this game kind of coming out of it, and what your sort of takeaways were from it?
I mean it's tough, right? I kind of feel like the big takeaway is that wow, Gino really has a hard time throwing a ball when it's raining. I think that was kind of one of the big takeaways for me because I'm looking at this game and I'm trying to make sense of it. The defense overall played pretty well, although they're playing a really bad offense that you should be able to play well against. But the defense does fine. The pass blocking, actually, I saw it might have been PFF or Amazon said that it was actually our best pass blocking game of the year, pretty much outside of maybe the Detroit game. So that was in place. We ran the ball fairly effectively. There was a lot of stuff in place, and yet here we were struggling to scrape out 19 points, needing overtime to do it. One touchdown the whole game. And I was trying to just make sense of it. And the main thing I came away with is, yeah, we need to build that roof over Lumen Field ASAP.
Well, and you can see a little bit why I've been caught for a long time. You'll hear it, I'm sure, in your chat a lot, where people will talk about future and what they want from the team or what the type of team they want, ideally. And you'll hear people talk about pass happy attacks and to become like the modern offenses in the NFL that are going to try to throw a high volume amount. And I've always pushed back on that, saying you need to have something within the structure of your team from a DNA standpoint every year on a yearly basis of a commitment to the run, because there is going to be games in that stadium where the inclement weather clicks in. And you've got, when that happens, really the fallback place for most offenses is indeed the running game, is it not?
Yeah, for many of them, although we have certainly seen some quarterbacks excel in those conditions. Guys like Aaron Rodgers has no problem. Pat Mahomes has had no problem playing all of his late year home games in Arrowhead and still playing really well. You've got guys like Brett Favre back in the day, always playing really well when it was cold. There are definitely guys who can do it, but you're right. There is
It's hard to
going to
find
come
those
a time.
guys. It's hard to
Yeah,
find those three
it
names you just
is.
mentioned. Those guys don't fall, just off the draft every
Yeah.
year.
In the most recent football game that we all watched, I think we saw Jared Goff really did not look good for about 3 quarters after a year where he looked really good. Mostly, I think, because it was really cold. And I mean, it wasn't raining, I don't think, in that game, but it was not good conditions.
Yeah.
So, and Goff is a good quarterback. At least he's above average. So you look at that and you go, unless you have one of those guys. I remember for years we talked about how Wilson, even when he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, he was not good in the rain. He really
Mhm.
struggled in the rain always. And that's why it is good that we have decided to go this path with guys like Ken Walker. And I think that we will probably bolster the backfield even a little bit more this offseason. So when you put it like that, it makes sense, but you have to make the investment. You can't just do it. It can't be
No,
like some of those, I'm thinking
but
about that
that's what
Green Bay.
sorry, go ahead. My bad.
I'm like thinking about that Green Bay playoff game a few years ago where we had Marshawn Lynch off the couch as our starting running back, and we were still trying to grind the ball out on the ground. And it's like, no, you need to have a real investment there.
Yes, and that's what I mean it from that from a contextual standpoint, Brendan, is it's not as much of like game day, every game day in a quest or Lumen Field that you're playing. You want to make sure you're balanced or that you're trying to run the ball. It's as much as just from a philosophy standpoint in general in the team, how you build the team, how you call the game, that they're always intrinsically does need to be a bit of a commitment towards running the ball because of those conditions. And I mean, even the ones you mentioned, and I would give you that you're right. I mean, it's Favre, Mahomes, and all those Rodgers. Yes, they do throw well in inclement conditions, but I would say that the conditions that those guys throw out in the Midwest is usually dry, snowy, cold weather, which in itself is not easy to throw into. I agree with you. Jared Goff struggled with his 2 gloves to throw this past week into those conditions. I do think it's a little bit of a different animal when you're talking about cold, wet, wind. And when those 3 elements that come together that we see very often in Lumen Field, that's the kind of conditions to me that are I don't even know if those 3 guys you mentioned play as well in this kind of conditions, or that they're able to produce at the level that they're able to produce out there in the Midwest in cold conditions as equivalency. Is that a fair point, would you say? Or do you think that it's an equal as far as the rain and the cold goes on that?
No, that's definitely a valid point. They're not all bad weather is built the same. That's absolutely true.
So we were able to kind of find our way through. I think you're right. The rain definitely impacted it. This is why I wanted to lead with. I'm glad you did too, because I did think that that's a part of it was a bit of an equalizer. And weather can be that way a little bit, where it's going to tampen down offenses. We're going to see it this probably upcoming week. What is it? I'm hearing a cyclone or something, or is it we're thinking a tsunami in San Francisco this next Sunday, Brendan, on some of these reports?
I have heard it's at the very least probably going to be raining all week, and it will probably rain on game day. So
Does that
that's
help, or I know we'll cover this more in the Thursday game, but do you think that helps or hurts us?
it definitely does not help. I can tell you that much. I feel
Yeah.
very confident in saying that. I mean, Brock Purdy, he played college where? Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gets pretty windy out there, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
not the greatest of conditions all the time. So even he's probably a little more used to it than a guy like Geno Smith, who played at what, West Virginia. And I mean, honestly, I don't even need to go through where he's been. We saw it on Sunday. I think the rain affected his game dramatically. That was
I think
probably his worst game of the year.
Yeah, it might have been. And I think he's been in another running game recently in there. I don't know, maybe it was the Raider game or it was the Panther game where he also struggled in as well, when it was maybe quite the conditions this last week, but still pretty wet. And so I think it is a little bit of a potential concern there, with Gino. I was really impressed, Brendan, and what I took away from this game is definitely weather was a part of it. Also, a little bit of what you and I have talked about is wanting to see that sense of urgency from these guys at times, and that we felt like it was a little bit missing in that Thursday night game where they weren't kind of rising to the moment or realizing what was sort of at stake. It felt like a little bit there was a feeling of, are they just kind of going through the motions. I did feel like this Sunday, and especially looking at some of the PFF scores, or like they talk about the advanced stats, pass blocking as well as we did. You saw a lot of guys, or a good collection of guys, have their best day of the year. And I thought that was telling of guys pulling together, Brendan, and going, look, we got to get this. We got to all put our best foot forward. It's now or never, right? And they showed us kind of a little bit for the first time when they needed to get it, not when it was a bonus to go get a win, but they actually needed, everything was on the line. That impressed me about this game too.
I mean, it was like pulling teeth, if we're being honest here. It was pulling teeth to get it. And there was a good chunk of that game where I kind of felt the opposite. I was like, everything's on the line in this game and you're going to come out this flat. It really, early on, it really kind of felt like things were just flat. But eventually, you're right. Absolutely. I think the pass rush had maybe their second best game of the year behind the Denver game. I think the Denver game, they were actually playing with their head on fire a little bit. So that was good. I think, like I said, the pass blocking played really well. Abe Lucas probably played his best game of the year, coming off the injury too, which is big. I think that maybe Quandre Diggs. These last 2 games have probably been his 2 best games of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed 100% there on that. Yeah, I think those guys would be, I'd add in on the list, even a Derek Young, Colby Parkinson, maybe Damian Lewis played his best game of the year. I thought those
Kay
guys
Johnson.
really Kay Johnson certainly played his best game of the year. Shelby Harris, I think, played his best game of the year. 84 Boye Mafe, I think you could say, played his best game. Cody Barton played his best game of the year. Quentin Jefferson played his best game of the year. Michael Jackson played his best game of the year. Bruce Irvin played his best game of the year. So it's definitely, look, the Rams were undermanned, no doubt about it. And this is a game you should win. They had nothing on the line. All that stuff is true. But, I do think that the team did show up in a way in this game where they understood what was on the line in that. And again, I think it was a little bit rough to start out. I think, though, like your point on the rain, is the rain a lack of effort at that point, or being flat, or is it that you're trying to deal with the conditions and figure out, what's working? And, you have Carroll talking about in this first half where Walker's doing maybe a little bit too much dancing. They just tell him into the second half, just start hitting the hole. Let's go. You make some adjustments on some things on the other side of it offensively and start to find your your footing a little bit there. And the offense at the end of the day, as much as they did struggle, Brendan, they still got 400 yards of total offense out of the gate with it. But again, we got to take into fact that it was the Rams team and where they were, and what was kind of going on with them. Geno did struggle in this one a little bit, as you said, one of his more bigger struggling games, and certainly I know fans are going to be driven by the opinion of Geno a lot of what he probably does in this playoffs, as far as how that sort of is the final sort of point of, okay, now this is what he was this year, so to speak. What do you make of Geno's season? Is Geno the guy that he was through the first 12 games of the season? Is he the guy that he's been through the back 5, 6, 7 games of the season? Is he somewhere in between?
I don't really like to judge people at their worst moment, and
No.
that's kind of what I feel like you would be doing, what some people are trying to do here. It's a game where, yeah, he definitely played bad, and I think both interceptions were just terrible decisions. Ramsey's all over that route on Metcalf. Some people were trying to say it was Metcalf's fault. I don't see how. I didn't get that.
I know. Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
hearing the same thing. I don't understand how they come to that conclusion.
Yeah, and the second interception, I think he threw it like 12 yards behind Metcalf. It was like, I don't even know if he was trying to throw it to him, honestly, because he missed him by so much. And there was the other one that should have been, gone back the other way, but the guy dropped it. So there were definitely some bad decisions in there, and I can't blame people for starting to go, okay, New York Jet Geno is back. I can't blame people for pointing out that, like, he can't go a game anymore without making a bad decision. But I kind of go back to what I've been saying. He's on a team that, as the year went on, really started to struggle to run the ball and struggled to play defense. The Seahawks this year probably have the worst defense that Pete Carroll has put together ever as Seahawks head coach. Statistically, they're tied with the 2010 team, where he, I think, cut like 835 different players before
It was
the season
902.
Yeah. So, of course, that defense was going to be bad. This is the worst defense Pete's ever put together. And yet, here we are with this winning record. I think that needs to be really stressed here. This team ultimately is here with this winning record, with this playoff spot, because of the offense. And there's no way that can be done without the quarterback doing his job. He did play better early than he did late. We all know that. But I don't know. I'm a little off calling him maybe, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, although I was never really doing that. But I still think he's good. I still think he can be good. And you got to remember, he's working with rookie tackles. Both of his tackles are rookies, which, by the way, almost never happens in the modern NFL.
Has
I know
never
there
happened.
really never.
In
I know it hadn't
50
happened
in
in
the
a long
last 50
time.
years, you might have a game where a team starts 2 rookie tackles in a game, but for a team to commit to starting 2 rookie tackles at the same time throughout the course of the season, that's not happened.
He's got garbage at center and right guard mostly. I know Phil Haynes and Gabe Jackson have both had a couple of good games, but those 2 positions have been really bad. And we've also really struggled to find receiver depth beyond the top 3 guys. Like, we threw Laquan Treadwell at the wall. Let's see if this sticks. Oh no. Okay. Let's go with Cade Johnson, who's been on our practice squad for 2 years. Okay. Here comes Penny Hart. And I look at all this and I go, I think he can be better than this. I need him to be a little better than this if we bring him back next year, but he can be. So I'm still pretty good with Geno. I'm not married to him. I'm not going to be devastated if I hear during the draft that we've franchise tagged Geno and traded him to the Buccaneers for their first round pick, or to the Jets for a second and third round pick. But I'm okay with Geno.
Yeah. And so kind of the hard way you're saying with it is a little bit of this, the dip in performance in the back half is you feel like we'll get back to putting the conditions in place that or even maybe improve the conditions of what he had to operate off of early in the season next year, and that you would have confidence that he would be able to tap back into that performance of what he showed back early on in the year through those first 12 games.
I mean, that's the goal, right? This offseason, you're going to go in and try to make the team better. That's the goal every offseason.
Yeah.
And there are clear ways you can make this offense better. By the way, not that we had bad running backs this year, but our starting running back got hurt way back in week 5. And Geno had to put the team on his shoulders for a decent chunk of the year. And it worked.
Yeah.
So I look at all this and I go, there are better quarterbacks out there. Although I would say not as many as you would typically see. This was not a great year for quarterback play in general. Rodgers did not play that well. Brady didn't play that well. Wilson played terribly. Even
Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson did not look good when he got back. Even Josh Allen played good, but as the year went on, he started to really get a little bit wild.
Mhm.
Like, and if this was last year and Geno was playing like this, he might be like a top 12 quarterback. But because so many of these guys have fallen off, it's more like top 8.
Dak Prescott, another guy that probably
And
is like
Dak
a
fell
little
off.
bit of a
I mean, like Jalen Hurts ascended. Okay, that's one. Joe Burrow is still up there. Sure.
Mhm.
Mahomes had an amazing year, but it feels like we're in a little bit of a lull
Derek
for
Carr.
elite quarterback play. Yeah.
I agree.
Daniel Jones didn't ascend or anything like that. Taylor Heineke didn't ascend. The quarterback play in the league right now is not where it's been previously. It feels like this is like a little bit of a valley.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is, and it's odd too with where offenses from prior years seem to always be going a little bit of an uptick further. Getting more explosive, more productive, more points, and with that, the better quarterback play that comes along with it. But it does, Brendan. Do you think it's just a 1-year outlier, or do you think that this is a sign of a trend moving forward, where the playing quarterback's going to get maybe a little tougher? Maybe defenses are kind of catching up from an evolutionary standpoint to the offenses, and the offenses' days of leading the pack wholly 100% are starting to maybe waver a bit.
I think the next 2 years are going to be really good for quarterbacks in the NFL because these next 2 drafts are going to supply quality starting quarterbacks, especially next year. It looks incredible. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Quinn Ewers, who's the other guy?
Penix.
Penix, maybe Cam Ward, maybe DJU. I'm not a Bo Nix fan, but some people like him. So
I'm not either. I don't. Yeah, he's got a share of people that really love him, but I can't quite get around.
But the top quarterbacks in this draft, like you might see like 4 guys go in the top 10. I think
I
so.
agree. Yeah.
I think it'll get better, but right now you're pushing out the old guard guys like Rodgers going out, Brady going out, maybe Wilson going out too. I mean, as of right now, I think that's the only reasonable conclusion anyone could make. And some guys got to step up and replace him. And like Kyler has fallen on his face. He's not going to be one of the guys. I would say I still really like Herbert. I think he's really good. But you've also got a guy like Lamar who went from winning MVP his second year to now.
Here come the injuries.
Yeah, I don't even know what happens this offseason. I don't know who's going to actually pay him. Like, is he going to end up taking like a 1-year deal to see if he can actually make it to the January one of these years?
Yeah, I wonder about that too. And I mean, he is kind of the hot commodity out there where you have a guy in his prime to go get, whereas these other quarterbacks that would be out there on the market are a little bit aging guys in their 30s, whereas with this guy, he is still, relatively young, but who's going to want to take that risk? And again, because with him, he's going to want all the money, where it's not just all the money in a big contract. It's all the money with the guaranteed money, where it's, well, no, we're not just going to sign this guy and we get out of it in 2 years if he tears an ACL. You're with him for 3-4 years. And I don't know which team it is that does that, Brendan, that does sign up for that. I do think there will be one, though, don't you? I mean, do you think really ends up a 1-year deal when this is all said and done at the end of this offseason?
My prediction is that the Jets give him a pretty decent contract because they're desperate. They have everything in place. They need a quarterback.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the Jets. I don't think it's going to be the Ravens. I feel like they would have done it by now. I'll say that.
Yeah, I don't buy it on the Ravens either. And I still think the Ravens with Richardson, right, Florida, swap out Lamar. Like, if they did that, I would be that's one of those things you can see kind of coming down the line where you go, that's just the no-brainer kind of thing for that franchise, the way that they're kind of running things. So,
yeah. It's starting to look like the only good quarterback in last year's draft was maybe Brock Purdy.
Yes, it is.
It's really starting to look that way. Maybe Bailey Zapp, but I don't really like Zapp that much.
Yeah, Bailey's another one of those guys. People love it. So he's got his sense of people like, oh, he's great. Like, I don't know, but yeah, the draft class, Brendan. It in a nutshell, it is what we thought it was, right? Like we talked a lot about it. Neither of us were very hyped up about these guys. We just weren't. You watch the film and you just go, there's too many problems here. There's too many issues here to want to consider this guy to be an elite prospect. And even in the first 3 rounds, want to take them. And it has been proven out. They avoided the minefield of quarterbacks this last offseason at Carroll and Schneider. And you got to give them props for that, Brendan, because there were so many guys, right? So many names along the way, from the guys that could have been drafted to the Bakers, to the Sam Darnolds, to the, Garoppolo trade. Like, there were so many potentialities that people were looking to go, and they avoid each of them to stay on the right path with Geno, which was just a great decision by the front office to go that direction.
Yeah, I guess Pickett's okay. I should actually take that back real quick. Pickett's all right.
Is he? I mean, it maybe
he
is.
started making some throws at the end of the year. I'll give him a little bit of credit there. They don't have much of an offensive line.
Yeah, I'll give him some time on it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he can. I think his ceiling is limited to me. It's like he might, and he was a guy that was going to tap into his floor quick. It's a little bit of a Mac Jones situation where it's like you're going to get. They might be able to burst really quick, but that's about as good as you're going to get. And we'll see on that one if I'm off on that or not. But that's my in looking at it. That was one thing I kind of was thinking was like, I don't know, you usually want to get a quarterback in the first round. You're looking at that ceiling, right? You're looking at like where's he going to go when he's at his best, as opposed to we're getting him at his best right now, but ain't going much higher than this.
Yeah, I a bold prediction for this offseason. I think that Malik Willis actually gets cut. I don't know if that's even a bold prediction anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Bold. That is a bold prediction, Brendan.
Yeah.
They're giving up on him after 1 year, huh?
I think Vrabel hates him, and I think the GM drafted him, and the GM got fired. So now he doesn't have any friends in there, and they literally signed a random guy off the street to start in a effective playoff game over Malik Willis. That's how little they think of him. So I look at that and I go, yeah, I think they're done with him.
Yeah, it makes complete sense to me that if they decide to do that. And you're right about Vrabel. He's now swinging the power in that room. So if he doesn't like him, he can certainly go, hey, this was a bad pick. We don't want to run with him. I think they've got him on a cheap contract, so they'll probably just keep him as a backup. But you're right about him not being the future there. He's not. They're not going to be thinking about him as their quarterback of the future with Vrabel. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you read between the lines on some of the stuff Vrabel said in the preseason and did in the preseason, I think he hates them.
Yeah, understandable. The kid's got so far to go as a quarterback. Like, I don't want to sit here and throw this guy out there and let him find his way. As I've got a team that's ready to be in the playoffs and is ready to compete right now. That we were the #1 seed last year. I mean, I wouldn't. That doesn't make any sense from their standpoint. They're not in a rebuild mode. Which, if you're going to take a quarterback and he's going to need 2 years and then you still don't know, you should probably be closer to rebuild than you should be closer to here we go, we're ready to kick it. So. We got a first donation out the gate here. Thank you, Osama Ben Diesel, for the $10 dono. Appreciate you, brother. Hope you're doing well tonight. And love the emoji there. It says, the NBA is lucky the Sonics are gone because Seattle is unbeatable in 2023. Kraken are 6-0, and the Hawks defense is a brick wall. Time to make the pundits cry harder into their Roger body pillows. They making an Aaron Rodgers body pillow?
I mean, I could probably get one made custom pretty easily
for the ladies. Is that the equivalent of the dolls for the dudes?
Yeah,
on that one.
yeah. I still kind of can't believe they let it happen because that first quarter, Green Bay got like 5 garbage calls in their favor, and I was like, here we go.
Yeah, they did. I was doing a counter on my live stream, Brendan. I was at 3, and I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, but the overturn on the catch by, what was it, St. Brown was just like, I was like, okay, I should turn this game off now. But luckily I didn't. And somehow, Dan Campbell, man. Motor City, Dan Campbell.
I felt like the officials had gotten to a point where like they've got to do it with a certain amount of subtlety if they're going to try to sway stuff, right? They can't out rig it. So they've got a certain amount of calls they can kind of do to kind of gently push the results to one way. But if they go too overt, right? If they go too much like, well, we took 2 interceptions off the board, we took a fumble off the board, people will go, wait. Because I thought that the one by Aiden Hutchinson when he got the sack, I'll go to my deathbed saying that was a fumble.
I never got a good angle of it. I actually didn't get a good shot at
there was a lot of there was some debate on the channel with me when live stream going back and forth between the chat, but they showed one last angle in slow motion, which was one of those tight shots, slow motion, where you see the ball being dislodged out of his hands on contact. And then it's just between their two chests and it's kind of floating around a little bit between them, but it's not, nobody has possession as it's going to the ground and then it bloops out, so, another one where they missed that one. So I think they tried, Brendan, but the Lions, you got to give them props, Brendan, man. They came out, that team's hungry. That team's scary for the future. They're getting the mentality in place. That's a mentality of a little bit like the team that we're going to be playing this next week on Saturday, where you can start to feel them getting all in. You can start to feel a whole team in on the process and hungry and wanting it. And that was not a game that they needed, but that was a game that they knew was going to make a statement. And I think they made a statement in that division as they go into this offseason, especially if that is, as it does appear to be, Rodgers' last game with the Green Bay Packers.
Man, he just signed an extension. How is he going to get out without retiring? Like, how does this work?
Well, just retire probably.
You think he's going to retire?
He's a guy to me like a little bit. I felt like this with Tom last year, and that we talked about this where they were already speaking about being kind of, well, it's you can kind of see the end. Well, it's kind of like when people when players in any sport start talking like that. To me, historically, it usually means that they're about ready to go, and they're usually pretty close to retirement when they start speaking about that. They don't tend to go play another 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I am making obviously a bit of an educated guess here, and certainly a team could come in and woo him maybe and say to the Packers, "We'll give you all this money to eat the dead money, or we'll give you all these draft picks to eat the dead money." But he does look a little bit in that game. I felt like a couple of those throws, Brendan. It felt like to me, it was a little bit like with Wilson, right? Where like last couple of years with Wilson, where he'd throw those moonshot balls, and he'd still get it there, but it wasn't quite getting there with the same kind of snappy sort of RPMs on it. It was taking a little bit longer to kind of get there. And I felt like on a couple of those throws in that game from Aaron, you saw a little bit of that age on those throws where a younger Aaron could probably fit those balls in on a little bit more of a line and not need to kind of give it so much arc to get it there. And maybe he's kind of starting to feel, which I mean, nearly 40 years old. It's no bad thing to say that about him, but that's my guess, man, is I think he does retire. I think there'll be people that do call to say, hey, would you be maybe, but it'll take such an offer, Brendan, because you mentioned the dead money for the Packers to move him. They have to get back the draft picks, but the team's not going to want to give a lot of draft picks back for Aaron because he is an older guy. And because you don't know how much longer he's going to be able to play. That would be the thing that then ends up just making a deal kind of untenable. You get to the point where then he just decides to kind of retire, I think, at that point.
You put it all together like that, it makes sense to me. What I would say, maybe he feels like things are going to be better this year because Christian Watson will be able to, come in and do more from day one instead of taking half the year to get up. Maybe they bring in another receiver. Maybe another young guy steps up. Like that's really what was going on this year for the most part. It felt like to me that offense just had no chance.
Well, I don't blame Rodgers on their drop this year at all. I think you're right. It's to me I can't believe what the Packers did with their receiver situation, having a 2-time MVP and being a team that was in the window to win, go to a Super Bowl again this year. And instead they went with these rookie wide receivers and just decided, well, we're not going to make any aggressive trades for any of these guys like AJ Brown that are out there or Tyreek Hill that's out there or whoever, try to find somebody out there that they can bring in to help him out. They just went, well, we'll give Aaron Rodgers rookies and we'll see how it goes. That was doomed to fail, I think, from the start. And you're right. If they come back to Rodgers, maybe and they're like, look, we'll make a trade for insert player A here to bring him back over to us, or this player there to bring him back over here, and hell, maybe they try to say the Raiders, like, we'll give you the draft picks you gave us plus or something back for Devontae Adams or something, and try to bring him back in. Maybe that'd be enough to do it at that point. But absent that, I think that he probably goes, I'm not coming back to just second year returns on rookie receivers and hoping they're great.
Yeah, what a disastrous chain of events for the Packers front office, by the way. They had the chance to foist the Rodgers thing onto someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers wanted out. He said, trade me, get me out of here. And they desperately clung on to him like they thought it was the most valuable thing in the world. They get one more half decent year out of him, and now he's going to retire, and you get nothing. Like, does somebody get fired for that? Like, that's almost as bad as making the Wilson trade, I feel like.
I think the problem is with getting fired is no, it doesn't happen because this is what happens when you don't have strong ownership group behind. And I love the fact the Packers have the whole like fans own the team thing that goes on. Like, that's great. It is awesome, but you are missing at times the owner who can come in and say, like, your guys' whole, we're going to do our patient approach. We have the Packer way of it. Yeah. Let's not do that right now. Let's change this up a little bit. And you bring up an important point here, Brendan, because we could be looking at this from 3 to 4 years from now and saying that the Broncos and the Packers both had a decision to make on their star quarterback. And the Seahawks knuckled down, made the decision, took the bullets for it, but then they get all of these benefits to help slingshot this team back into being prominent over the next 4 or 5 years, while the Packers find themselves kind of slowly bled a little bit to death because of the contract they gave out. Now I know they have Jordan Love and they do have still a pretty good defense overall at the end of the day, Brendan, but I do look at that and go, that might end up being something that we look at with both these organizations and go, if they had done an equivalent, maybe they would have been able to keep themselves on that window, keeping the window open rather than the window starting to feel like it's like slowly shutting on them a little bit or almost nearly completely shut.
Yeah, and I just didn't get it at the time. He publicly asked out. At that point, it's over. Why are you what? I just don't understand their thought process over there. Like when he asks out to the world, like makes it publicly known, get me out of Green Bay.
Yeah.
Like, it's over. Why are you clinging on to him? And this has become, I think, one of the worst front office decisions ever now if he retires.
Especially with the Jordan Love. You set like it's like you set this whole stage for this thing, you know. It's like you got your wife and you've gone and got this girlfriend and you're dating the girlfriend for all this time while you're still married. You still got the ring on, right? And the wife's like, "Look, you got the girl. She's been here a couple of years. Why don't you just go with her? You're obviously done with me." And they're like, "No, no, no. I still want you here. You know, I still want you in the house." You know, it feels a little bit like that to me. But yeah, the Packers just they had set everything up to do it. They even had the team in Denver that hired Hackett specifically just to bring him in. I think Denver would have given them every bit the haul that we got, you know. And I do think that Rodgers probably would have gotten more out of that Denver team, I think, than Russ, because he can play a little more, you know, on time and all that. And he has more of a familiarity with Hackett and all that stuff. But
Denver's got 11 wins this year with Rodgers, I think.
Probably so. But they were weird about it, Brendan. They were weird about it in a way that they weren't with Favre. You know, they were willing to on Favre say, okay, that's it. We've had enough of the drama of you. Do you want to retire? Don't you want to retire? Hell with it. We're moving you to the Jets. And they didn't do that with Rodgers. I don't know why, but you're right. It's something that's maybe potentially fire worthy on that. Because again, like you said, he was obvious he really didn't quite want to be there. He would begrudgingly come back, but he didn't want to be there. And when you didn't have the receivers there after that, especially, that should have been all of the indication you need to say, okay, we had a good run here. We tried to make this go. We got the one Super Bowl with Rodgers. You know, let's call it what it is, kind of on that.
Yeah.
You know? Thank you though, Osama, for the $10 dono. Appreciate you. Rodney Presho with the $2 donation. Appreciate you, Rodney. Says, I feel this game is important for Geno. It's a little bit kind of like what we're talking about on that. It's gonna steer a lot of the public thought process on this, right, Brendan? Like if Geno comes out and plays like he did this last week with the Rams, people will say, look, he fell off the back. And this is, again, let's go back to what you just said a few minutes ago. You and I stand on the same place where we feel like, look, the 12 games of what he showed you is more closer aligned to what Geno is rather than what he's shown you on the back half. And that would include even this playoff game, which might be played in cyclone-like conditions. So I'm not going to arrive at that place, but I think Rodney's on the right boat here, Brendan, where you and I will be doing a lot of probably trying to, you know, support and defend a little bit of Geno if he goes out and has that kind of struggling game in San Francisco. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I have no interest. Maybe this sounds like I'm setting myself up already for what I'm afraid may very well happen this weekend, but he's playing the best defense in the league, maybe. Is San Fran the best defense? They probably are, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're healthy. You know, you're talking Bosa, you're talking Armstead, Warner, Greenlaw. You've got
Ward, Tre'Davious
Ward, Hufanga. It's just such a loaded defense on the road in a crummy stadium. Like by the way, the field might be an ice rink by the time we play that game. Who knows? I still remember Mike Remmers literally skating around in Super Bowl 50 against Von Miller because the turf was so bad. I don't think they fixed it because none of these teams seem like they think they're obligated to make their field playable.
I know. I hate it, Brent. Like I saw remember Tariq Woolen in this game had a play where he hurt his leg and they showed the slow motion of it. And you just see how the turf, when his foot comes down and the turf just goes like this, or there's just no give on that thing at all when those guys step. And it's so silly the NFL owners don't just go full grass and take care of it like take care of the grass and the conditions like it is the most important thing. Like this is to protect our product instead of it being like, well, it's, you know, as long as we have something out there that's green, that'll work.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so it's going to be raining probably all week and during the game. He doesn't have his number 3 receiver. Goodwin's out. He doesn't have his most utilized tight end, Will Dissly. He's out. We might be down to 1 running back, depending on what happens with DJ Dallas this week. I have no interest in judging Geno in that situation and trying to play if he has a bad game, which is very possible, and going, see, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. So I agree, Rodney, it'll be considered a very important game for people as far as the public sentiment goes, but for us, it won't be as much in that place for all the reasons that Brendan just said and more. I mean, this is a tough team. This Niner team is in their window. And as he said, they're playing their best football of the year right now. And they have a defense that is legitimately the best in football this year. And maybe even by a good amount, maybe not even like it's close second place. Like they're maybe even far and away kind of the best defense overall. So it will be important, Rodney, but we're not going to take any final determinations on this because he's not going to have to play every given Sunday, normally the best defense in the entire NFL. That's going to be a bit of an outlier. But thank you, Rodney, for the donation. Snail, thank you for the $5 dono. Says Harris, Woods, and Jefferson might become different players in the playoffs. Those graybeards on that D line have been hungry for a chip.
I will say, I think me and you have both kind of assumed that Quentin Jefferson was going to be a one and done. He was going to get cut in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
These last 3 games, he's been, maybe 4 games. He's been really good. A lot of pressure. I don't know what got into him because he's been in the league a while and he's never been this good. But these last 4 games, I'm kind of rethinking things now. Like, I don't want him to be your best or second best defensive lineman in your rotation, but if he's like your third or fourth best, maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking 20 snaps, then I'm potentially open to it. You can save a decent amount of money by moving on from him. Not a lot, but it's a little bit. It's a couple million at least. So hopefully Snail, these guys that are older and that do have to kind of throughout the course of their season, I think as you're intimating here a little bit that there is some points you preserve your body and try to keep yourself ready to go for the course of a full season. And that maybe now in this game, you're just letting it all out. You know, you're emptying the tank, as they say, in this type of game. So I agree. Jefferson has been playing better. I would be open to it, Brendon. It's a little bit, and this will be a talk that we'll get into a little bit with like the, Jalen Carter type discussion and stuff. But I do come down to, again, when I look at the defensive line, I look at it as a rotation thing, or as a, the strength of the line is the fullness of the rotation, not simply the starters that you're throwing out there. And I'm really starting to get more and more in that component of things where it's not about a guy playing 75% of the snaps in the defensive line. It's about having that rotation to keep those guys fresh, but then having the talented guys in the rotation that can have an impact when you bring in the starters out, and that you're not taking a huge drop off of a cliff if they come in there. And Jefferson's giving you a little bit of something. Shelby's stepped up too in the last couple of weeks a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, I've always liked Shelby. I've always thought he's a good player. He was good for a long time in Denver, and he hasn't been as good here, but I don't think it's on him. But I did a study last year. I remember I made a video looking at the rotations that we had on our defensive line the year we won the Super Bowl, where nobody was playing more than like 32 or 33 snaps. You had Averill, you had Bennett, you had Clemens, you had Tony McDaniel. Did we have Clint McDonald? Yeah, Red Bryant. We might have had Clint McDonald.
Yep. Yeah, he was the NASCAR. He was your NASCAR 3 tech.
Yeah. So all those guys, none of them played more than 33 snaps a game, I think. And then as the years went on after that, the load on Bennett and Averill in particular just kept going up. And I think by the end, both those guys were playing about 50 snaps a game.
Yeah.
So that shows you how big a deal that stuff is.
And by the end, Michael Bennett was, the reputation with him here at the time was that he still can be a useful player, but he's picking his spots. Well, why is he picking his spots? Because when you rock a guy out there for 50 snaps, you can tell him, I want you to play hard on all of these 50 snaps, but they're going to get gassed. That's the way it is, especially if you're trying to play hard every snap. And so you might still have him out there taking snaps and trying to do it, but he's going to then have to pick those snaps. And it's one of those things where, the player will do that naturally. The player's not going to tap his helmet and be like, I'm tired, I need to come out. And he'll try to run out there and do it, but he won't be as effective. And that's the point, is that keeping him in that 35% range is where that's the money spot to keeping those guys at their most effective. And it's the part that I think fans struggle with, Brendon, because they do think a little of the old school approach of the guy's got to play 85% of the snaps in order to be considered, good. And if he's not doing that, then he's just not, his conditioning sucks, or he's not good enough, and it's a little bit of the stuff I hear with Jalen Carter that drives me insane, quite frankly, because this is the way the game goes now in the modern age. It's not 1995 anymore. It's a new age. And so it doesn't bother me as much, but hopefully you're right, Snail. Hopefully the Graybeards can step up and, make a couple plays and show those young boys what it is to be hungry and have to wait a long period of time to get your opportunity to go get that chip. Appreciate the donation, though. Thank you so much. Chad Hart with a $10 donation. Appreciate you too, Chad. Thank you as well. Says, go Hawks. I could see this game being a smash mouth game, pounding the football up and down the field. Old school style. Seahawks 20, Niners 17. Ooh, Chad coming in with some optimism there, Brendon. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no reason for me to think this because the Niners have like the best offense in the league since Purdy came in. They're averaging like 38 points a game or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel like the game will be a blowout. I don't think they're going to hang like 40 point plus on us.
I don't either. I don't. I'm not saying that I think we're winning this game, but I do think that we keep it close. you look at the last game that we played with them where, as Carol was talking about, it's kind of two defensive plays that really get out away from you a little bit on that one. I know there was the back-breaking run at the end and all that, but you did keep it a little closer from the first game. I do think that the divisional aspect of it, being that we have played each other, will also kind of level a little bit of the playing field. As we talked about, you're not going to disguise, you're not going to do exotic stuff if you're the Niners. It's really going to throw us off. Though that play they did last time, Brendon, with the two bubble screen fakes and then they hit Kittle down the middle, that was pretty inventive last time when they played us. That was pretty good on
Yeah,
their on their part.
I did appreciate that.
Yeah, that's Shanahan showing flexing off some muscle there with that a little bit. But I think this is going to be that way too, Chad. I think that this is going to be a run heavy game. You're probably going to see damn near 70, 75 rushing attempts between the two teams in this game, I think, especially if there's a cyclone. Nobody's going to want to be throwing the football and look
Yeah.
with Purdy pushing the ball up the field, what will affect the running, throwing in the rain as well is if you have a guy who does have a little bit of a limited arm strength, trying to throw in the rain. And there were some throws he made in Seattle last time. Then it was like, ooh, that arm doesn't really want to push you up the field. He can do the dink and dunk stuff and all the Niner stuff that they ask a quarterback to do, like Garoppolo did. But you ask him to get pushing up the field on this, and that's where I think maybe the Hawks can maybe take advantage, especially if it is raining like it is.
Yeah, I will say we seem to struggle a little bit more stopping the runs between the tackles against the Rams this week compared to the first game. Cam Akers had 100 on us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the Jordan Brooks effect or what, but I am a little bit concerned about what that Niners rushing attack could do to us.
Well, and Tanner Muse did struggle in this last game. So it was one of his games he's had that he's been a really pretty good player for us, but this was one filling in for Jordan that, and I think it spoke to it that they were bringing in, was that Johnson linebacker guy? They're bringing him in later on in the game at that point because I think they were recognizing there were some issues there with Tanner in the run game and that they made that kind of change specifically. I mean, maybe you can flip between those two guys where like Tanner's in as a linebacker if it's a passing situation and Johnson's in there if it's like a run down as a run defender. You kind of combo the two of them up maybe a little bit, but like they've done with safety, Brendon, where they take Tease Tabor if it's a passing situation, they know for sure it is. He comes out there and plays strong safety. Otherwise, it's Abram in there. For most of the snaps around that. So maybe I'm okay with that. That's creative. That's utilizing your talent. That's understanding, look, we don't have the linebacker that we'd like to have right here who could do it all, but we got to kind of manufacture this a little bit. So I think that does show some open-minded approach by the coaching staff to try to find a fix that's a little outside the box because there isn't that guy in this, the Brooks gown and everything else. You just don't have the guy maybe can do it all. Do you see this as a smash mouth game?
I think it kind of has to be.
Yeah, I think it does as well. And we'll be, me and Brendon are still contemplating our score predictions. So we'll have to do that on the Thursday show, Chad. We're not sure yet on ours. We're still, still turning over all of the possibilities on that one. But I like your score and I like your confidence and I love your donation, Chad. So thank you so much for that. I hope you are 100% right. 100% right. Estes with a $5 donation. Thank you, Estes. Says, love Lockett, but who can be RT Higgins? He's getting older. I want to push him into the Tyler Boyd role. Want to preserve him for as long as possible. Well, I think is Derek Young going to become that guy, Brandon?
It's possible. I don't know if I'd want to bet on a long shot like that if I don't have to.
Yeah.
I kind of like Derek Young, but at the end of the day, he's a guy who had 2 catches this year. I'm not going to go crazy about it. And we both talked a little bit about receivers you could bring in this offseason, and I think that's very much on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I've said before that I'm not against drafting a receiver like Jordan Addison with our second first-round pick, which is currently 20. If he's there, I'm pretty into that. And I'm definitely looking at receivers in the second round as well.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility for your Hawks to take one there, Estes, and I don't think either me or Brendon would poo-poo that because certainly, yes, you have Lockett getting older. You've relied heavily on Lockett and DK to be your production at wide receiver over the last 4 years, and those guys have played almost every single game, which has been very nice for our Hawks to have that. But is that going to carry forward into the future? Well, I mean, that's pretty hard to see that continue on with the nature of football and knowing that injuries do come up at some point or another. That combined with the fact that Eskridge has not developed from the third wide receiver spot, I think that does probably put that as a bit of a priority. I think there's bigger priorities, Estes, and it might come down to it on it, like Brendon says on the first round pick. Do you want to go with a receiver or do you want to go with Trenton Simpson? If you go to the second round and you want to take a receiver in the second round pick, do you want to go with a receiver? Do you want to go with Schmitz out of Minnesota, a center? What is the bigger priority at that, to bring in that third receiver or to go get that guy that is more for a position that's been hugely problematic? Because we're talking about with the receiver position and potential injuries about a potential problem, but in center, in right guard, on the defensive line, at middle linebacker, you got true, actual, ongoing issues happening right now that are limiting you. And I think that's where I think, yes, because I love the opportunity to do it, but that's the worry I have, is that you end up having to make that choice between ignoring something that might be a greater need for the insurance that you're provided by that receiver.
Yeah. And Quentin Johnson played so bad against Georgia the other night that maybe he falls to our late first round pick. I don't know.
You very well may. I've long maintained I never saw him in the tier 1 group, and always saw him as a guy that should have been into that tier 2 late teens. He's just not in that same kind of, he's not Garrett Wilson from last year. He's just not. He doesn't have that kind of refinement to his game. Very freakish guy, talented wise, but there is the rough edges that you're going to have to smooth out a little bit with him. So yeah, didn't have his greatest game there. Georgia,
1 catch, 3 yards.
Georgia defense was a monster, Brendon. Like that's one of the best defenses of the last 2 years I've ever seen in college football. It's right up there with the Huskies 90 team, which I still maintain is the best defense I've ever seen in college football. It's right there with some of the Alabama defenses that have come through in recent years. I mean, they're stocked with so many pros there, and just everybody kind of showed up the other night, didn't they? Like, everybody kind of took their chance to kind of pop.
I mean, I streamed the national title game, which ended up being kind of a disaster.
I was thinking about it, but that's what happened was what I thought was going to happen. 67 to 62-7.
65-7.
65.
Yeah. So I turned the stream off at halftime. I was like, I'm not wasting my life watching this game and streaming it for another 2 hours.
I was really thinking about it, but then I just thought that I was like, Georgia's going to just run this team off the field, and TCU had a right to be there. Some people push back on this. I feel like the same way about Cincinnati last year. Like, they have a right to be there. It's any other team you brought in there. I think you take Michigan and you put them up against Georgia. Okay, so it's 45-19 instead of 50. Like, they're getting blown out though too. I don't think there's any team out there outside of, maybe, I guess Ohio State did kind of hang in with Georgia. So maybe if Michigan beat Ohio State, you go, well, maybe they would have hung in there. But I still like the fact that the smaller schools can still have a chance, that it doesn't just have to be the creme de la creme blue blood college programs that get an opportunity to get there. You do have to have your wins on your schedule, right? You have to have some legitimate wins to get there. You can't just be in the low end conference and you've gone through and beat all the weak knees, and they're like, well, look, we're 11-0. So,
Yeah. I mean, after that game, I think the committee is going to be very hesitant to ever let a team like that in until they expand to 12 teams.
Yeah, I do agree.
It kind of reminds me of, do you remember the Colt Brennan Hawaii teams?
Yes.
When they actually, against Georgia, let the Colt Brennan led Hawaii whatevers into a big bowl game. I think it was a Big 5 bowl game. And I think Colt Brennan got sacked like every time he dropped back or something. It was like not even it was insane what happened in that game. And after that, I was like, okay, we're never doing that again.
Yeah. No, and look, TCU was not on the same land as the other team. I think you're right that until we get the playoffs, they're not going to want another win in, because they don't want to replicate that. They know that's not it's not good for the college deal, and it's one of those things where Ohio State Georgia game was essentially the national title game at the end of the day. So, but love your thoughts on that, Estes. And I think that definitely it's a possibility, man. It certainly is a possibility. It is on the priority list, maybe not priority A, but maybe C or D, maybe E, and we got a lot of picks. So we got a lot of picks. You can pick a lot of different guys. So you're not just locked in. Well, we only got this many picks here. So they can address it. That is for sure. Sanchez with a $5 donation. Hope you're doing good tonight, R. Sanchez. Thank you for the $5 dono. Says, which 3 players would you all have asked for in the Wilson trade in retrospect? Ooh, what a great question.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you ask for too much and Denver says yes, Wilson probably just says, okay, no, go back to the drawing board, because he has the no trade clause. So yeah, maybe we could have asked for a guy like Surtain or Simmons or at the time Chubb, but then Wilson's like, okay, why am I even going over there at this point? So you have to walk the balance. getting enough to feel good, but not taking so much that Wilson decides I don't want to go there anymore, right?
I think so to a degree, but I mean, then you come back to Wilson, you go, okay, well, we're not going to honor your trade request. Now you're going to be stuck here another year. So you want to do that? Like you want it out of here. Do you want out of here? I think you're right that the Broncos, I don't think they necessarily would have given up Surtain. Maybe they would have given up Chubb because he was on the final year of his deal. I don't think they would have given up Simmons because he just signed a new contract. They would have eaten the dead money on that. So that wasn't a realistic possibility for him. I think there would only really be for me, Brendan, one guy that I might have changed out in retrospect to look at. I wouldn't want anyone on their offensive line. Nobody on their defense really gets me that excited with what they. I mean, they got a great defense. So I know I should be probably having a couple other guys where I'm like Dominic Purcell or, where they got that Jewel guy. I should probably be like, ooh, no, those are the guys I want. I would have actually gone with Javonte Williams, if I could have paired him out instead of maybe instead of Shelby Harris or Noah Fant. I don't think they would have given him up, but that would have been the one guy I would have. But I don't know, but there was even two other guys there for me, Sanchez.
I feel like Denver would either say no or Wilson would say no at that point. Because the whole idea was he was going somewhere that would build a really good running game. So you're going to say, okay, we're going to send you
Was
here.
it though?
Running back.
Was
because
it though?
Javonte Williams, I think we both agreed a reason why we thought Denver would at least be decent this year was Javonte Williams.
No, I did in that respect, but I don't know if that was what was driving Wilson to go to Denver. He wants to drive to Denver because he wants his star to be brighter. I don't think at the head of that, your star is brighter if you're saying, okay, we want to make sure we got a running game here. I think that if Wilson had his ideal situation and this played out going to Denver this year, he would have been a high volume passer and successful in doing so. And they would have been throwing at the highest rate he'd thrown out in his entire career, throwing for 4,500, 5,000 yards, and he wouldn't have been running as much unless they were up in football games and they're just trying to wind down the clock. I don't think he would have poo-pooed the whole trade over Javonte Williams.
Okay, but then why did he slap down the trade to Philly and Washington? What was the reason for that then?
Well, in regards to the one to I don't, are we sure that he did to the Philly? That he said no to Philly?
That was the report. And I do have a little bit of a conspiracy theory here, but before I get to that, why would he say no to the Philly trade and the Washington trade then? That implies that he was looking for something specific.
Well, I would say that what he's looking for is to go to a team with the right situation. I would argue that I'd like to see where the reports are on the Philly reports. I don't think that was as much of a truancy with them having Jalen Hurts there and with what they had built off last season and where they were going. I don't think that they were as much in on doing that. I don't. They had the AJ Brown trade. They were going a lot, but I think the Washington one was a valid one. Why not wanting to go to Washington? Because the team sucks. You go to Denver and the team sucks, but they're way more stacked up from a talent standpoint, especially from an offensive side of things, right? And so he looked at it from that standpoint of he was trying to replicate what Tom was doing, which is to go to the most complete team that had good parts on both sides of the ball that he can go in and then sort of take advantage of that type of stuff. But I think it was the totality of that rather than the individual players within that. I don't see how he would have said no to Philadelphia if they offered. They're offering an amazing offensive line. They've got a great defense. I think he would have gone there if they would have said, if that was really on the table for him to do that, especially with an offensive-minded head coach, which is something I think he was wanting. I think he would have gone there. I don't think that report's accurate on that. I don't. It may be on it, but I just can't see how I would have said no.
My conspiracy theory, if he did say no to the Philly trade, was maybe Philly did not agree to extend him before the season started.
That's possible. That's possible.
Maybe he kind of knew that this was a possibility, and he's like, "I want to get paid now." And Denver, because they were desperate, said, "Okay, we'll extend you before you play a snap."
Hey, I think that's a great conspiracy thought on that, as far as that being a possibility. That absolutely could have been, because Eagles are a smart franchise in a lot of respects, and they wouldn't be the type of franchise that said, "Well, I know they did this with AJ Brown, but I don't know that they necessarily would have done it with Wilson." And so, I think that's a great point on your part, where that could have been something that would have been impactful on it. I mean, Denver certainly didn't have like prolonged negotiations with Wilson, right? The deal just got done, kind of like they had sort of agreed on it in principle at some other point, in time. So Sanchez, I guess I would go Javonte Williams. Who's their guard they got there? Maybe like Risner, I guess, maybe.
I mean, Risner. No, Quinn. No, it's the
Quinn Miners.
Quinn Miners. That's the guy that the Seahawks fans really wanted that one year because of his story.
Yeah, but he's been.
And I was super not into him. I was like, please no.
And he hasn't been all that good. So
No, he hasn't.
it's hard on this one, Sanchez, because there just isn't as many, I can't think of any other guys that I really look at. Like, so Chubb, no. Not a Randy Gregory or some of these signs. So there's really isn't any other guys. I can only go to maybe two. I'll give you maybe a Dominic Purcell as a zero tech that you could bring in, help you out in the run game, I guess. But I don't see a lot else out there that I would have been jumping on.
Yeah, I don't mind what we got. Obviously, Drew Lock is not really it, but it's not totally his fault. Gino just ended up being a lot better than we thought. Shelby Harris, I still like him. He's not what he was. He's not a Pro Bowler anymore. And Noah Fant didn't have a monster year or anything, but he was a valuable part of what this offense did in terms of their 3 tight end sets. He was a better blocker than people expected. I think that Noah Fant gets sold a little short because he didn't have big stats. He was never going to have big stats in this offense.
I mean, and wouldn't you say at the end of the day, I mean, if we're breaking down the parts of this trade into a percentage point, 80% of this trade is the draft picks, is it not? I mean, as far as what the value is to the club of the Seahawks in that trade.
Very small. I wasn't really sweating the players. I'm like maybe 15%.
Yeah. So it's a very tiny percent on that. I just think that was those draft picks that's the crown jewel of that trade. That's the part. Everything else is kind of cherries or a little bit of topping on top of the trade, but those were the ones that really did it. But I was happy with the guys they got. Sanchez. I don't have any of the guys that Sutton, no. Judy, no. None of the tight ends that they had there would have interested me at all. It's I know they got a great defense, but it's nothing anybody there that really jumps out to me that I would want. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but is what it is on that one, I guess. Thank you though, Sanchez, for the $5 donation. Adrian next with the $2 dono. Appreciate you. Says win or lose, this was a great year. Beastquake 1-8-11.
Yeah, the Seahawks game was on the 10-year anniversary, or excuse me, 12-year anniversary of the Beastquake. Okay. I saw the Facebook post about that.
So yeah, there's some echoes to that team that went in the playoffs that year. A lot of people didn't think that team was going to ever have a chance to get in the playoffs that year with Carroll. They got in with Hasselbeck, and nobody thought they would deserve to be there, and they ended up winning that game. Maybe history can repeat itself here, Adrian X. But that was a great game. Where'd you watch the Beastquake game? Do you remember that where you were?
I was at home.
You were at home?
Yeah, I was at home. I usually watch games at home. That's kind of my thing. I'm not a big fan of going out. Not a big fan of going to games. It's always a pain, especially I don't live that close. So
yeah,
I just watch games at home.
I definitely like the experience at home. Probably best. I just remember is during the run. I remember just the thing that stood out to me was when Marshawn was running. I was in California at the time. And it got so loud that the 12th man cut out the feed with the earthquake for a second, or and then came back in as he was right in the middle, of the run where it was just insane. But I still remember that run just going, I can't believe he did that. It still to me is the most miraculous run I've ever seen a running back make in my life.
My favorite part was the most important offensive lineman on the play. It might've been Tyler Columbus or something, completely blew his block and it didn't matter. No. That should have been stopped for a 2-yard loss.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was, he broke eight or nine tackles on that, and a signature move where he stiff arms the guy across the field. And then even the subtle tackle he breaks at the end, which is actually a really tough tackle to break there at the end, but he just did it where it's he was in such a flow state by the end of that run. It was not to be denied, it was not to be denied. But best run in football history, in my opinion, the Beastquake run. There's some really great ones, but that one it gave you everything you could possibly want from a back on a run, from speed to strength to agility to breaking tackles to, having to do a lot on his own.
I actually looked it up earlier today because I was researching something else. Seahawks that year, 2010, 23rd in points scored and 25th in points allowed. And somehow there we are in the playoffs.
7-9 got in the playoffs and beat the former Super Bowl champs. And it's again where a lot of folks might be looking at this game and go, well, there is no chance. It's you've been to this place before where people looked and goes, you're going up against a juggernaut right now. You guys are this big, they're this big, you got no chance, and this is football, and weird things can happen in football, and they got to still go out and play those games. And it's easy to predict it from the back, but it's always stuff goes a little bit differently than you quite think you're going to predict. Hell, look at this last week of this week. We had 22% chance to get in the playoffs. We end up in the playoffs. That's why I always say, that's why me and Brendan both say, just get in the playoffs. And anything happens, you got 4 wins is all you need to get yourself to a Super Bowl. 4 mere wins in a row get you to a Super Bowl. It's a tall task. It's hard. It's a lot of good teams you got to go through, but it's a lot easier than from when you start the season. You need to first get in the playoffs, then further than it. Like, oh, you're here, you're dancing now. But yeah, it was a great game, Adrian X. Thank you for the $1 donation. Appreciate you. Kevin Mullen with a $5 dono. Thank you, Kevin. PFF suggests we keep a single high safety as Purdy doesn't throw deep, but to use a strong safety defensive back as box, flat zone, or blitz. Keep Purdy uncomfortable. What do you think about that, Brendon?
I think that's kind of what you have to do, especially if the weather's going to be bad. There's no way Purdy's going to be killing you over the top, right?
I can't see it. And this is I think PFF is completely on point with this one, Kevin. It's one that I share. And that is that, look, I want to test Purdy's arm out. I want him to show me he can throw a 50-yard go about down the field. That's what I want to see. Show me you can make that throw down the football field. And I don't think that he can make it accurately. He might get it there, but I don't think it's going to get there accurately. And I don't think it's going to get there with a lot of oomph. So yeah, I think the best way to go out here is it's a two-pronged thing, right? It's okay. We got to first stop this deadly rushing attack. What's the best thing that can help a deadly rushing attack for a defense? An eighth man in the box, right? It's been that way for years. Well, then on the other side of it, you have a quarterback who's limited in his ability to throw. So then what you would want to do is not be as worried about some of the depth stuff that you'd have to get to, like cover two defenses and whatnot, where you're really worried about the deep half, squeeze it down. So it's the combination of those two factors go together to say, yes, squeeze down on the box, bring the eighth man defender down there, play the single high stuff. You do it naturally within your defense already anyway. The interception that he had this last week, Quandre Diggs, that's on a cover 3 look. That's what that is essentially that he's running there when Diggs sort of baits Mayfield into making that throw there in that moment. So yeah, Kevin, that's absolutely, for me, if I'm defensively, the path to go with here is to let's get this, as many guys down near the box. Let's make it uncomfortable for Purdy. I come back to, again, that first matchup, Brendon. He started out 11 for 11 in that game. 11 for 11. You didn't blitz him once. You didn't bring any pressure-based looks. 11 for 11, got him comfortable, got him in rhythm. On his 12th attempt, you brought a blitz. Got your first incompletion of the game. Second play after that, Brendon, you showed a blitz and dropped out of it. Got another incompletion. I think that there's something to be said for not only bringing the stack fronts here, Brendon, but whether or not bring a blitz every time, show a blitz. This is a young kid. He's going to be confused. He's not going to see things clearly, but you got to do a variety of things with that then to take advantage of that. And if you're just staying with your normal stuff of being predictable and not trying to be safe and trying to be protective, I think that that's going to get you exploited in this game, as far as you're going to lose this game if you play that. You got to do this with a little more aggressiveness. I hope they do.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Kevin, though. Appreciate the donation, man. The Snail with a $5 donation. Appreciate you as well. Says 49ers are the best team in the league. If we do beat them, I like our odds. How do you like our odds if we beat the Niners, Brendon?
Yeah, then I have to reevaluate, because as of right now, I feel like if we played Philly, they'd just run the ball for 500 yards. If we beat the Niners, I'm going to have to be like, well, maybe not. And Jalen Hurts, not all the way there. That Eagles team not looking so great. We played the Chiefs okay a couple weeks ago, so maybe I'd have to even give us a chance in that hypothetical matchup. I mean, it depends on how we beat them, though. Do we beat them because Brock Purdy throws like 6 interceptions or something and just completely loses the plot? If that happens, then I'm going to be like, well, it's cool to win. I'm thrilled, obviously, but I'm not going to necessarily think that's going to carry over.
Yeah, I will feel better for I'd be a little different than however you come out of this with a win. If you come out with a win, I'm going to be way more confident in a Super Bowl potential run than I would be coming into this game. Partly because, yes, it is you being San Francisco, Brendon, but also for the reasons that you just mentioned. The Minnesota Vikings are super suspect, and they're not playing their best football of the year at the end of the year. The Eagles are definitely not playing their best football of the year at the end of the year. And Jalen Hurts just had an arm thing that he's still kind of trying to get through, right? You have Tampa Bay, who's been at their worst that they've been since Tom Brady has been there. They basically just eked that division out. You have the New York Giants that you've already beaten if they were to somehow get through their first round of their playoff matchup. The Cowboys, who with Dak Prescott and him kind of flailing a little bit as he has, they have a little bit of a wild variety in what you might see from that team week by week. This is one of the weakest years we've seen from the NFC in probably 10 years, maybe, as far as a conference goes. And I think that does open that door just a little bit more for us, Brendon.
I do think that if Jalen Hurts gets healthy, I do think Philly's like a legitimately really good team. But yeah, the Vikings, honestly, I said this a few days ago, and I stand by it. I don't even know if the Vikings are good. They might just be a below average team that is here by, the grace of God.
Yeah. Completely. I'm, 9-0 in one score games, and trying to. They've been on the line all year, twisting to either side on that. So, yeah, I do think Eagles. You're right. Eagles are legitimate, and they have a right. They will be a tough team on it. I do wonder though with that arm thing on Hurts, and it just suddenly, is it going to recover back that quickly? We'll see. But it definitely, Snail, the bottom line is you feel a lot better about your chances if you can get the Niners, because you are taking out the, like you say, the best team in the NFC. I think they are truly the best team. And so you've knocked them off the mark in a weaker conference overall in a given year. That's certainly, that's going to grease the wheels, man. Absolutely, it's going to grease the wheels. But thank you, Snail. Thank you for the $5 dono, man. Appreciate you. Ebrius Cantus with a $5 donation. Thank you, Ebrius. I really do appreciate it. It says, does anyone have information on NorbCam's channel? Is there any way fans can help? Let's go all. We are all family. Well, thank you for the $5 donation, man, Ebris. I reached out to Norb on IG. So I did say, hey, is there anything that HawksNest can do? And I know Brendon would be probably similar of a state as far as if there's something that he can do. There's not a lot of anything for us to do at this point right now, as I understand it, because what he's got to do is essentially go through the YouTube portal and reach out to their customer support. They do have a method when you do get hacked to be able to theoretically get your account back. But I has also heard that there's been some dodginess with people having a little bit of a mixed bag. Some people able to get their account back, some people not able to get their account back. So it is horrible what he is going through. If Norb's got to eventually create another whole new channel and go from scratch in that way, I'm sure all of us in the Seahawks community will do the right thing to try to help him out and get him back up onto his feet really quickly if it goes that direction. No doubt about it. So it's for guys like me and Brendon, what's happened to Norb there is like our worst nightmare. Brendon, you've been doing this for 13 years. Don't you have how many years were the videos going back?
It was an old channel. It was a previous channel, but I started 15 years ago.
Yeah. And so it's like, I just, having all your videos deleted off, having all your content you put in, and not having as I can't do my live stream backups, Brendon. I was doing the math. Like that's 2,500 hours of, tape I would need to get as far as, I'm in like 10 terabytes or something to try to probably pull all that stuff down. So it's hard to back everything up. I got some stuff backed up, but yes, Ebris, if there's anything that Norm does say that needs to be done on it, we'll definitely jump in and help out if we can.
Right. And I mean, there's really not too much that we can do. I only know the rough details of what happened. I've met Norb Cam in real life a couple times, but it's been several years.
Okay. Yeah, I did, and he's a good guy. So it's awful what's happened to him. I don't want to see him. He should be able to get his channel back, and YouTube should have something in place, Ebris, to where they've got it backed up, I would think, somewhere.
Yeah, and by the way, Ebrius, I saw you in the chat, and I don't appreciate the implications. Just so you know, just calm down. We will get to your comment in due time. It doesn't mean we don't care about NorbCam just because we don't immediately address it.
Yeah,
I am not just here for myself.
Yeah, no, it's we're planning on talking about it at some point, but we're just going through the flow of what we do here, Ebris, and that's usually why we take a couple hours to do these kind of shows, because we want to try to get through all the comments on it. So, and deal with everybody who does a paid comment like yourself. Make sure we're really addressing what you guys are saying.
Correct.
But thank you for the $5 donation, and yeah, we've got it back, man. We'll do whatever it takes. I think he's going to get it back, but if not, we'll help him out. Paul Third with the $5 donation. Thank you, Paul. I do appreciate it. It says, I got a Niners streak ending Saturday. I got the Niners streak ending Saturday. Purdy will give Hawks field position with some turnovers, maybe due to the weather, and Gino will capitalize 22-17. Woo! Like that, Paul. I like the sound of that one, brother.
You are going to, if you want to win this game, you are going to need to get some turnovers. I don't think we got one in the first two games against the Niners.
No, and wasn't it a big in the second one? There was that moment, I think, too, where we had the was it DJ Dallas fumble, especially.
It was Homer.
It was Homer. You've got to. That's right. You got to be clean on your end fumble. You've got to win this turnover battle in this game. I agree with Brendon. This is a real big key to this game. Gino can't give up the ball. You can't have silly fumbles. You've got to be clean in that respect. It's already going to be hard enough to win this game, even if you are clean in that respect. But getting some other turnovers on the other side of it. This is also where I think pressuring Purdy and getting some of that up there, getting things congested up there near the line, really working to try to first take. It's hard to take the running game away from the Niners, even if you got the 8-man front. I'll give you that. But work from that standpoint. I think you make them uncomfortable, and then that's usually where those mistakes will start to come from, because he is feeling a little bit more of that heat. Again, as evidenced by 11 for 11 to start the game last time. Then he had two straight incompletions because of the fact that, we're showing a pressure-based look. That's with young guys. That's what happens when those young rookie guys, or that you got a guy just in the league and he gets that stack fronts, they get nervous. They get a little dicey. They don't tend to operate really well in those kind of given situations. This is why Bill Belichick for years has handled rookie quarterbacks so thoroughly. It's because he doesn't mess around. He doesn't overthink it. He's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw every kind of pressure-based look at this rookie quarterback that he's ever seen in his life. He's going to see stuff he's never seen before. And I'm going to get his head twisting by the end of the game, like something out of The Exorcist. And that's what I would try to do with Purdy in this given game, Paul. And I think you can take advantage if you do.
Yeah. Our pass rush has been better lately too. Last couple games been better, so hopefully that spills over.
Hopefully so there. But Paul, I love your score prediction. We got some confidence in the chat, and that's what I want to see. Have some confidence. We're in bonus territory here. And as me and Brendon said, it's hard to beat a team 3 straight times in a given year. It is really tough to do. David Pugh coming in with a $20 donation. Thank you so much, David. I really do appreciate it, man. You're awesome, brother. You're putting a lot of donos on my last stream too. So thank you for all the donations and the support of the channel. He says, I have my issues with Pete. Trust me. But even the best coaches can have a losing record if the team isn't behind them or isn't buying into their culture and style. Yet this inexperienced yet exciting roster went 9-8. Any thoughts on that one, Brendon?
I mean, he does get these players to buy in. That seems to be the case. It kind of reminds me of some previous Seahawks teams where the talent wasn't really that great. The 2010 team was a really good example. That team was terrible. That team was complete garbage. There are some coaches who were really good who I think win 2 games with that team. He won 7.
Mm-hmm.
The 2018 team, I think most coaches win like 5 or 6 games. He won 10. I do think that is an area where Pete is good. He takes these teams that under normal circumstances would be bad, if not terrible, and kind of just finds a way to ugly up the games and squeak out these wins. Now, I don't know if that was the case this year because this team had a good offense and a bad defense. The path was a little bit different, but the idea is still the same. You find these weird ways to win games.
Yeah. And it's a guy like Pete knows how to kind of get you through on some of these games sometimes, and just his feel for it. I think the way you put this, David, the starters, I'm the same way. I do have some issues with Pete, but there's still a lot of stuff that Pete does bring to the table. And the things that I have as far as issues, things are really, I think, smaller things than ever, especially if he's now being a little bit more removed from, let's say, the drafting and free agency process of being, the driver of that, and that Schneider actually is really rolling that through. But with what Brendon said on this, I agree. It's that he gets the team to buy in. He gets a team, whether he's got the most talent or not the most talent, he gets them to buy in a way that is unique to Pete and that a lot of coaches can't always do, not to this kind of consistent level of things. And my issues with Pete come back to sometimes schematics, right? Sometimes playing a little bit too, soft with things and trying not to kind of lose rather than trying to go for it and win. But as far as, getting young players to play above themselves, as far as getting a team to buy in, that is absolutely something that Coach Carroll has kind of, in a lot of ways, I think, mastered. Do we got to get more talented? Do we got to get better schematically? Yeah, on that side, we do to get to this team to becoming elite. But the place that he's already got the box checked is absolutely getting guys buying into his culture. And that is an elemental part to becoming an elite team. You could have all the talent in the world, you could have all the schematics, but if you don't have the buy-in, you don't have the coach that can bring it all together, there is going to be a limitation to how far you can get as a football team.
Yeah.
But David, thank you for the $20 donation, man. I really do appreciate it. And Pete's, maybe you can make the argument, David, that maybe potentially this year with 2 rookie tackles, starting 6 rookies, taking Geno as he's taken, with all that was behind him as a narrative. And this was maybe his best coaching job or one of his best coaching jobs he's done here in Seattle when you take that into account a little bit.
I don't think it's better than 2018. I think that was his best coaching job still.
Yeah, maybe there was a couple years that probably a little bit better, but it's one of his best, you'd say, right? It's probably his top 3 coaching years here in Seattle.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better ones. I mean, it's hard for me to say it's better than winning the Super Bowl and being probably the best team in the league the whole season, like in 2013. But I can understand the argument, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, what I would say with that is that, well, yeah, it's true. But then you also, you got a guy like Dan Campbell on your staff, Chris Richard's on your staff. You've got, a very talented team at that point. Is as much required for Pete to get them there that year as like this year when
Dan Campbell was on that coaching staff?
Dan Quinn.
Oh, okay. I was about to say if I had Dan Quinn on my coaching staff, I think I would have known.
He would have stood out on the sideline. Yeah, you would
Yeah.
have seen that guy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, Dan. Yeah, no, Dan Quinn. So I think that year, did he do his best job that year? I don't know if he did. Maybe it's probably hard to say unless we were actually in the room and no one was what. But no matter what, he's done a phenomenal job with where this roster was. People thought we'd be competing with the Texans for the worst roster in the league. You have been not just slightly better than that. You were a playoff team, and that does speak to Coach Carroll. I think culture, style, like you mentioned, David, are the main points of that. Absolutely. So thank you, man. David coming in with a double 20. Oh my God, David. Thank you so much, man. 2 $20 donations. Appreciate you, man. You're awesome. He says, simply saying that this season shows me that Pete knows what he's doing, and hearing him get called a bad or dumb coach is straight incorrect. How many coaches can trade 2 Hall of Famers and make the playoffs right after?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some truth there, but I do think that there also needs to be some nuance here. Like, this is the worst defense we've had under Carroll, I think, including maybe the 2010 team. This team is ultimately here because they have a top 10 offense. And yeah, Pete's the head coach, so he deserves some credit for that. But, there are other people that may deserve more credit for that. Like, I'm trying to untangle things sometimes. Like, I watched that game on Sunday, and we keep running the ball up the gut behind Blythe and Jackson, and they're getting blown up. And we keep doing it. And I'm like, okay, is this Waldron or is this Pete? Because this smells like Pete, but it's Waldron's offense. I'm like, okay, I need to untangle this and figure out who is the guy who keeps running the ball up the middle thinking it's going to work.
Yeah, I think the word you use is nuance here. And David, I'd lean with Brendon on this it's very easy sometimes to paint the broad brush one way or another. And I think a human nature and mentality is to sometimes try to find the simple, easy categorized thing of what's going on in front of you. I think with Pete, there's a complicated nature to this, and you got to unpack it all, both the good and the bad. And my feeling on it is this, David, in that, yes, 2 Hall of Famers you moved on from and you made the playoffs, but he had also hand rebuilt that defense like 3 times over since the Legion of Boom. He'd also went out and taken a first-round pick on the middle linebacker position in Jordan Brooks 2 years prior as the eventual replacement for Bobby Wagner. Say nothing of the 3rd-round pick that you put on Cody Barton. So, you had taken steps to have some replacements in play on that. You'd had taken some steps to have a defense that could be built up and play better than what Brendon just talked about, it being one of the worst defenses he's had here. And the reasons you had those struggles on defense weren't for necessarily a lack of talent wholly. That's probably a part of it, but it's also from, like I talk about, it's from the adaptation of schematics. It's the having at times weeks where you're giving your players positions, or you're putting your players in a position to have schematic advantages. Too often right now, when I look on the defensive side of the ball specifically, David, we don't get those schematic advantages on a weekly basis. We're just going to we're going to run out what we do, and we're going to hope that we're going to be able to hold the line. And sometimes it works, but most of the time this year, it didn't work doing that. And I think it's not that you need a coach who's so brilliant where every game he's the chess master running 4D chess, but you need to have some plays throughout the course of the game where you feel like your defense is getting those schematic advantages for the players. So it's not just all truly on their talent, and then they're out there to be, they have to carry the day almost wholly on their own without that support of a schematic coming in to help them a little bit and giving them an advantage a bit. And I would say, David, that this team has a future playoff trajectory where they will be probably over the next couple of years, that team that's in the playoff hunt every year with it. But if we're talking about getting to being an elite team, it's hard for me, and I'd love to see what you think on this, Brendon. It's hard for me to believe that if we don't ever build in those schematic advantages along with the extra talent we need to bring in, if we just leave that open, or we leave that we leave that on the table, so as far as an advantage to take advantage of, hard for me to see us getting to playing it to a team that can win a Super Bowl if you're leaving that particular thing on the table as we do. And I've gone into the details of this with the Vic Fangio scheme and the specific ways that you've not adapted it this year. That stuff's got to take a step forward if we're going to get to becoming an elite team. Not a good team, not a team that gets the playoffs. Carroll can get this team to the playoffs in the future. But I'm talking about getting to Super Bowls, getting back to conference championships, which it's been since 2014 that we've not been to that. What do you think about that, Brendon?
Yeah. There have to be multiple levels in which you evaluate this. And, we've there was a long period of time where we were the worst team in the league in the draft, other than maybe like the Giants. I did a study once, and I was trying to find a team that was worse than us in the draft from like 2013 to 2021. And it was like the Giants, and that's about it. And The thing that I really think needs to, have the record set straight on, that I see a lot lately, is I based off the information that we have, Pete wanted to keep Wilson. I think Pete said many times, I wanted to keep Wilson. I wanted to keep him his whole career. I was ready to make him the highest paid player in the league. I was totally on board for that. That's what Pete said. Pete Wilson. So these people, there's definitely people out there who are like, well, you got to give Pete a lot of credit for trading Wilson. And I'm like, no, he deserves no credit for that.
Yeah.
Wilson got traded because he wanted to get traded and Schneider wanted him to get traded. And I think the reason why Carroll has been really petty with Wilson in public this year, taking shots at him and kind of throwing him under the bus, has been because he was wounded that Russ wanted out. He was like, I thought this was my guy. I thought we were connected forever. And then he wants bigger and better things. I think that's why he was talking about the armband. I think that's why he was talking about the booing. So whenever somebody, like on Twitter, I said something several days ago, and somebody said, well, you have to give Pete a lot of credit for, pulling off this great trade. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. So I do want to push back on that, because I see that a lot, and I want the record to be set correctly on that.
Yeah. And that I agree with you on that, with that there. I think, David, the important part of what and thank you for the double $20 donation too. You were awesome, brother.
Yeah.
Neither me nor Brendon would ever put these two things on Pete Carroll. I would never call him a bad coach, and I would never call him a dumb coach. That would be never an application that I would apply to Coach Carroll. There are things about him that frustrate with me, but he's still a top-notch coach in this league. He doesn't have the kind of success that he's had over this last 10 years if he wasn't one of the better coaches in the league. I do always look through the lens of, David, I want my team to get to an elite state. I want us aspiring to become elite state. I want us to aspire to become a Super Bowl team, not a playoff team, not a perennial playoff team, but a Super Bowl team. That's, to me, the goal when you're in the NFL. And it's hard to get, and there's a lot of franchises I know that don't get there, but that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that that should be where the goal is structured. And I think that if there's, to get there, you've got to have every oar in the water pulling. And if you're leaving a couple of oars out of the water and the other oars are pulling, hard to see me in that stance, absent us being able to stack elite Hall of Fame like talent across the board like we once did back 10 years ago, to think that we can get to that elite state if Carroll doesn't kind of update that stuff. I think he will. I'm having some confidence. I've talked about it took him 2 years on offense. Maybe it's taken him 2 years on defense to kind of do those adaptations, and they're going to bring in the right personnel this offseason. But that's really a big key for Carroll going forward is will he kind of update that defense in the way that they have updated this offense, really driving it forward, taking those steps forward with it. And I hope he does, because if he does, with the stuff you mentioned about David, with the good that he brings, with the benefits he brings, if he can do that stuff on the other end of it, look out. You have all the makings for becoming that elite team on top of the talent about to be injected into this roster over the next year.
Right.
But David, you're awesome, man. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you. Second here, making sure we get us caught up. David, another one. Oh my God. $5 donut from David. Appreciate you, brother. You are awesome. Awesome. He says, and shout out to Gino and Waldron's creativity and play calling to get us here, because somehow I hurt someone's feeling in the chat by not mentioning them. Oh goodness.
Yeah, we busted out the Wildcat that week, this week, didn't we?
Oh, we did. We did. Yeah. The Wildcat with Dallas. I was like, just don't throw the ball, right, Brendon? I'm sure you were thinking the same thing. Just don't let Dallas throw. Just don't let him throw. Don't let him throw.
The fact that we let him do it says he must be able to do it in practice. Maybe that was just like the one really bad throw. Maybe the next time he unleashes it, it's going to be like a 60-yard touchdown.
Well, I think what happens is they just get it when those guys run the trick plays like he does in that stance. The player gets it in his head that he has to throw the ball, right? Like there's not that thought process like a quarterback. If you don't see it, throw it away. They feel like they got to force it in there, like here's my chance. Here's the opportunity. I got to get it in there. Where, no, just throw it away if it's not there and open, read it, throw it away if it ain't there. Running backs have a hard time with that, but I liked it too. I like the creativity they showed in the game on that. They brought out a couple of different looks this year, from the 3 tight end sets to the 3-man backfield. We were running something this week we'd have DK and Tyler on the far outside of the line behind each other. So DK's on the line and then Tyler's behind him, sort of kind of spreading the defense out. They hadn't shown a lot of that this year. So yeah, they've been very creative. And I will give Carroll credit. He did adopt a new offense this year, and he really bought into this offense. And the thing about that you got to give Carroll credit for on this is that this offense goes in a lot of ways against what he would have wanted to have this do. He allowed it to be what it is so it could be its most productive, but specifically running the ball, passing the ball at like 55% of the time this year, wherever we were at, somewhere around that neighborhood of things for a lot of this year. That's completely out of Carroll's wheelhouse. He would never want to do that. And yet he did it because he knew that's what made them the most effective. The leaning in a little bit more into the short passing attack and doing some of that stuff has been not as much of what we've done prior. So, the adjustments have been made on that side of it. And so that creativity of Waldron was great, but good on Carroll to also take the reins off and let him be that creative guy. Let your offensive coordinator. Now he needs to do it for Desai and Hurt on the other side of the ball. Now just do the other side of the ball and it'll be great. But
yeah, did you hear Desai's getting a look at DC for the Browns?
Ooh, makes sense.
Yeah, there was a tweet this morning from Rappaport. It was like, among the candidates that the Browns will look at for their defensive coordinator include the impressive Sean Desai. And I was like, I like him, but I don't know if he's been impressive. But
I was more impressed with what he did with the Bears last year than what he's done here this year necessarily. And again, because I don't think the coverages have been all that much more changed this year on the back end. And I could be completely wrong on this, but they just look very similar to what we've done prior. So where's his effect, on that? Especially because, like you said, you're also one of the worst, one of the worst Carroll defenses too. But what he did with Chicago was impressive with getting that defense to play as well as they did, with as little talent as they had to work with there. I mean, I don't think that Chicago defense fell back to earth this year without him too. So it probably speaks to his loss then this year with them going, oh, well, you went back pretty far losing that guy too. It speaks to his impact, coming there and helping out. David, thank you for the triple donation though, man. You are amazing, bro. You are amazing. I love the Carroll support too. Random McDaniel with a $5 donation says, for Brendon, although Will Disley fell short of 1,000 yards, our tight end room did eclipse that mark. Any plans to stick to your promise?
I mean, there's no promise to stick to.
It was Disley, Randall. He made the.
I mean, honestly, before the year, I probably would have predicted our tight end room collectively gets to 1K. I think that was very reasonable given the fact that we had traded for Fant. We had a quarterback who liked to use tight ends more in theory than our previous quarterback. And we also had this offense that was going to be more tight end heavy like that. It just all added up.
Yeah.
But I mean, Disley, I don't think even got to 350. So
nope. So
I had nothing to worry about.
Nothing to worry about on that one, Brent. You're going to have to change your 58.9 to your username though, Randall. He's far off that pace.
Maybe if he didn't get hurt the last two games, he would have had like 400 yards in each game.
He maybe pulled it off, man. He did have those openings those first 2 years of his career, Brendan, that were something like that, didn't he? He blew up in his first 2 years where he was the first 5 games before he got injured in those years. He was insane.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
Yeah, Bruce, no worries, man. We'll be here we got Norb Cam's back and stuff's being, we talk about stuff in the background of this. So he ain't going to be left out on a pontoon out in the middle of the ocean. We'll figure it out. Seahawks fans all got our back. Thank you though, Randall, for the $5 donation. Hope you're doing well tonight, man. Snail with a $2 donation says 52-0. Seattle, Pete is the only head coach NFCW next year.
He's the only head coach. Well, I mean, we're 2/3 of the way there, right?
What is he saying in this comment? I'm missing it.
Because Kingsbury's gone. McVay, it looks like he's going to retire.
Oh.
So if Shanahan got canned, then Pete would be the only head coach to return. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. If nothing else, he's bought himself time because of the Brock Purdy thing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are still 49ers fans out there that don't like him. Still, for some reason. Don't ask me why.
And I'm all in on Shanahan. I think he's a very good coach. I'd love to see him go somewhere else. I'd love to see him go to the AFC. I'd be perfectly happy with that. Yeah. Thank you, though, Snail. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess we could use this opportunity. Let's talk about the Kingsbury and McVay stuff real quick because that affects us.
Yeah, it does. It does. Have we got anything for sure on the McVay thing yet, or is it still a little bit of he's...
Everybody keeps saying he's clearly checked out and about to retire, but he hasn't done it yet.
Okay. I mean, yeah, let's discuss it. Well, first off, the Cardinal organization showed you, I think, Brendan, with this right out the gate. They showed you with this that hire was bad at the first point. That's number one, and that's obvious. But number two, with the Kingsbury hire, it shows you that the Cardinal organization and how they've been running things has been wrong for years now. And that's the reason you have Keim and the coach both out. But this isn't the first just thing with just these coach and this general manager. It's been years of stuff not being done quite right there, where I could see Rams and 49ers where you see the intelligence behind their approach on stuff. It's been hard to do that with the Cardinals, hasn't it? You look at the Hollywood Brown trade, right? I mean, the Hopkins trade was a good one when you made at the time for what you're able to pull and get David Johnson out. But drafting quarterbacks back to back in first rounds, throwing all the money at J.J. Watt that they did, they earned those firings, didn't they? I mean, both guys did.
Yeah, I mean, Kingsbury's record in the NFL is like 28-38 or something, 28, 38-1. So it's pretty hard to have that record on a team that, by the way, 2 years ago went all in and not get fired. So it had to happen.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. Like this team, they spent all that money on Watt and AJ Green 2 years ago. And that was like okay, we're going pedal to the metal right now. And this is the result. It's not that different from like what happened with Hackett. Denver went all in and they were about as bad as Arizona was this year. So the only difference is Kingsbury actually had 3 years prior to build his offense, because this was year 4, and still he never had a top 10 offense. The best offense Arizona's had under Kingsbury was last year. It was 11th. And that's why you bring him in. Now they haven't had a top 10 defense yet either. So it's not like that side's great, but yeah, he had to go. He definitely deserves to get fired. I just can't believe they mind tricked themselves into extending Kingsbury just to, that
And
weird.
Keim.
Yeah, and Keim, knowing that this was a very realistic possibility. And like Keim, he's definitely done some good things, but like the last couple first round picks have been what? Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons. I don't think either of those guys are that good, right? Like that hasn't really worked out.
No.
I mean, AJ Green worked for 1 year, I guess. JJ Watt's been good for whatever it's worth. And they let go of Chandler Jones at exactly the right moment. So there are definitely good decisions in there, but I
think they
mean,
just don't have a philosophy is what I look at. Like they wanted to build, you mentioned they wanted to build a super offense, which is, I think that's right. When you point out that offense, that's the key. Cause yeah, the defense is bad, but this has also been one of those new age teams that go, let's go all in offense and we'll do kind of the bare minimum defensively wise. And we'll just become a super offense team. Right. And that's what draws you to make, the trade for DeAndre Hopkins. You've got the first round pick trade for Hollywood Brown. You got the second round pick that you make on Rondale Moore at the time. You make the trade for Zach Ertz. Right. I think they drafted a tight end this offseason too. In addition to that, they Trey McBride, I think, is they brought in. So, they if you're going to put that much resources in an offense, you better have a top 10 offense. You make a trade for Rodney Hudson, DJ Humphries, Josh Jones. I think they took in the 3rd round a couple of years ago at the tackle. You're expecting that offense to be performing then at that point. And especially for a guy who's supposed to be a quote unquote guru in Kingsbury as an offensive mind, which he had never really earned.
Yeah. Well, here's my question though. How are you going to find a coach willing to work with Kyler and what he wants? Because, when they had Kyler, I don't think Kyler's had a single snap under center since he got into the NFL. Is that correct?
He's probably had a couple, but it's not been much. It's a spread heavy formation and how they operate.
Yeah. Like, I think they run everything from the gun. Maybe when he has to do a kneel down, maybe that's under center.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've only ever seen one shotgun kneel down in my life. It was the year Greg Schiano was coaching the Bucks, and he kept having his players like take dives at players, at players to try to ruin the kneel down.
Yeah.
So I think the Eagles actually did a kneel down from shotgun, so he couldn't do that.
Yeah. No, they did. I remember that.
Yeah.
He got blowback for that big time.
Yeah. Probably my least favorite person to ever be in the NFL in any capacity, Greg Schiano.
Yeah, he seemed like an a-hole. He just kind of seemed like I've heard some stories of him. Just does not sound like the funnest of guys to play for. What if you were looking at a college coach? I think this does bring this to mind with Kingsbury. What should be the requirement, or what should be something that's like a base marker that they're hitting from your standpoint to be considered a guy that should be ready to go at the NFL level if they're going to make that leap from college to the pros directly without actually being an assistant coach and the head coach in the pros?
It's really hard. I mean, you looked at Kingsbury and you knew what made things work for him at Texas Tech, right? They passed the ball 98% of the time pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's a non-starter. I think that a lot of NFL teams would love to have Lincoln Riley, and
Mm-hmm.
his offenses are not radically different from that. Um, that's tough. That's a really tough one because even like, do you think Kingsbury's a bad coach, or do you think it was just a bad organization that made do you actually think he's bad?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
He had Patrick Mahomes and couldn't get a winning season out of that Texas Tech team.
Uh that's a good that's pretty bad.
Yeah, and they're
Especially
not.
now.
It's not like they're playing the top competition, Texas Tech, right? Like they're going through lesser, kind of mostly opponents, and he's to me he's the poster boy to me of failing upwards. And he was due to go be the USC offensive coordinator with the old coach that was there prior to Lincoln Riley, and then the Cardinals just suddenly talked themselves into bringing him in there, and that was just completely foolish. And I think I would say at least my baseline would be Brendan if we're talking about baseline. You got to have a winning record in college. If I'm going to bring you up to the NFL, you're going to at
Yeah.
least need to have that. Like that's at least my base marker of whether or not I'm going to do. Because if you can't win in college, how the hell are you going to win in the pros? It's no way. The wins are way easier at the college level than they will be at the pro level. And so
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, but sometimes I remember when the Giants hired Joe Judge. I was thinking about that, and then I kind of came to the conclusion. I think it's really hard for people like us to know who is going to be a good coach because there's so much stuff we don't see. The stuff that
100%.
they do,
Yeah.
how many hours a week do you think an NFL head coach works during the season?
Well, 100 at least.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was like if somebody told me it was like 130.
No, I wouldn't either.
Like you're just asleep, and then when you're awake, you're working,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think that's what
Yeah.
that takes.
And
You
how
know,
much of that stuff do we see?
no, none of it basically, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think everything I've seen with Kingsbury, the thought process that you got him in an interview and he's got a losing record and that personality is selling you on his vision. I None of that one made sense to me at the time of the hire of it, and it hasn't made sense in retrospect of it. It is silly. I think you asked a question about Kyler. I think Kyler's going to have the same thing applied to him that Russell Wilson's going to have applied to him with whoever coach takes over, which is okay. I'm coming in here and you're handing me this quarterback I'm stuck with initially, but you're not going to determine the job I do. You're not going to hold me responsible for the failure of this said player since they already might be kind of a little bit broken in the way that they go about what they do. And
Yeah.
I think both new coaches are going to get that kind of pass in those situations. And
Right.
because it's how can you hold any new coach for either of those two situations responsible to stuff that they didn't have any decision on, which might be completely foobarred at this point. Maybe they can get it fixed. They'll try, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but it might just well very be foobarred.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking about it. Like Kingsbury was doing all the stuff that Kyler wanted to do. Nothing from under center, spread offense, a lot of receivers, all the stuff that Kyler wanted to do. Are you going to find another coach that is willing to capitulate that much? Or is the next guy you bring gonna be like, yeah, you're gonna run stuff under center sometimes. Yeah, we're gonna go, two receivers sometimes. I think so. And does that make Kyler even worse?
I don't necessarily think so, to be honest with you. I think this is where we come to an offensive minded coach or a coach needs to not let a quarterback drive them in what they're doing. Absent a guy, maybe Tom Brady's the only guy that I would apply in this way that he gets that sort of pass to dictate these things. I think it wasn't in Russell's best benefit to say, I need to be cooking and throwing at a high volume rate. I don't think it's in Kyler Murray's best interest that he says, I'm in a spread formation. Russell Wilson actually started to get some decent play this year from doing exactly something that I talked about this offseason. Tell me if I'm a liar about this or if I'm saying this wrong, Brendan, because you know I was here speaking about this. The way to get Russell Wilson successful moving forward is how? What did I say? He needs to be in a run-based offense, and he needs to be taking snaps from under center with a lot of play action off of that run game. That's where they found their success. The Broncos offense did the last couple of weeks in football. I would argue Kyler Murray needs to do the same thing. But what happens is quarterbacks don't like to turn their back to the defense on play action. It quite literally does boil down to that. They don't like the
Mhm.
thought that they might have to take a blindside hit coming off that play action when they turn back around, right? They get it when they're in shotgun. They can see everything coming. Everything's clear. Everything's right there. But It's for the best of the offense. It's for the most productive offense that those kind of guys, especially because they are mobile guys that they can move and they can throw on the move. So those rollouts then really fit well into their game on the back of it. And if Russell Wilson has a chance to reclimate what he was, it will be on being a low volume passer, working on a power-based rushing attack with a lot of play action under center. I think Kyler could find some success with that, Brendon. He's always going to be limited by the fact that he's a hobbit. Nothing's going to change that, right? You're not going to help the size on that, but that's where the rollouts do help too, right? Because what do the rollouts do, Brendon? They take you out of the center and they take you out of the pocket from between the tackle boxes. They get you to the edge where then you've got a clear pathway to see down the football field, where even if you're a smaller guy, it doesn't make a difference at that point. You can see clearly what's going on down there. Now it simplifies your reads. It takes everything to a half field approach, right? Unless you're Jared Goff playing in Lambeau, you're not going to throw back across the field 50 yards in the opposite direction. So again, this is where quarterbacks will naturally push back on you, Brendon, and go, well, I don't like turning my back. Well, I don't like just the half field read. Well, tough. If it makes the offense most successful and puts the most points on the board, and if you're going to fail if we try to go high volume the other direction, that's the way it plays. So I think it could, Brendon, but I also maintain this is what we're seeing right now, is which I think is a little bit of the death of the diva age of quarterbacks. Roger retires. Wilson starts to make his peace with, I got to be more game managery. Kyler Murray may have to make his peace with being more game managery with who they bring in, right? And maybe we're starting to see a little bit of this transition and change, which I think would be really good for the NFL, because I've not enjoyed the diva age of quarterbacks.
Yeah. I blame LeBron. It all came from LeBron.
It's all that decision. That's what caused this. It's his Miami decision that broke this down. David Pugh with the $5 donation. Thank you, David, for another donation. Says hashtag get Shanahan canned. Operation GSC has begun, my fellow Hawk fans. Hawk fans, assemble. It has begun, David. We're going to talk these Niner fans into it yet. So as soon as we beat him this week, we're like, you guys got to let go of Shanahan. This is obvious. He's not the guy at this point.
I mean, we're not going to need to. Some of them are going to start saying it. They're like, we're winning because of defense. Promote DeMeco Ryans.
Oh, I bet there's a couple of them out there. I bet there's a few of them out there, Brendon. So it's crazy to me though. I think he has absolutely done enough, in my opinion, to solidify him as one of the best coaches in the NFL. I put him top 5, wouldn't you, at least?
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah. So
did you hear the rumor that DeMeco Ryans doesn't want to go to the Texans because when he was a player, they tried to like cheat him out of an injury claim or something?
Yeah, I did hear. I didn't know it was about the injury claim thing. I thought he was doing it a little bit because of what he saw with how they treated Lovie Smith. Personally, like I look at it a little bit like, you know, I'd be like, you're already a bad organization. You do that.
That was hilarious, by the way.
What?
They didn't even wait until Black Monday. They were so angry they won that game. They just said, we're not even going to give you Black Monday.
Which and here's the ironic part about that. If they're really in love with Bryce Young, like they say, and Stroud's going to one anyway, and they end up with their guy anyway.
Yeah.
If their intention was to take Young as it was, what difference does it make that they won the game for you on it? And
I mean, assuming they get him, which I think they will, but there's no other reason why you fire him Sunday night, right?
I can't think of a reason why you do that. No, it's pretty cold, especially because you only gave him 1 year. Like you didn't give a full year, basically. It does speak to maybe that they were pissed that he did that. But again, to give a guy like that 1 year with that roster, when you hired him like that, when nobody really wanted to go there anyway, and it's being proven now, people still don't want to go there now. This is why bad organizations remain bad organizations. Like we talk about the Cardinals, like you start making decisions, like you make a bad decision where you realize, well, Kyler's kind of starting to struggle. Maybe this isn't right. Okay, we're going this offseason. We're going to extend our general manager. We're going to extend our coach, and we're going to give our quarterback a new monster contract. Wait, what? It's one thing to make a bad mistake. It's another thing to double back down on a bad mistake and just keep kind of hammering it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Texans do.
Yeah, and we might see it with the Broncos this offseason if they trade 2 first-round picks for Sean Payton.
Boy, yeah, that would be insane on their part, I think, to do that with and look, Payton's a great coach, and they'll throw all the money at him in addition to it. Do you think that's what they're gonna have to spend? Maybe because they have to wait on the first round pick, right, Brendon? It would maybe
first round pick is going to be pretty bad, probably. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, guys. Chat's going to hate me for this one, but I kind of think the Niners are at least going to make the NFC title game.
Mm-hmm.
So, just being real, that pick is not going to be that good. I think the Saints are going to be like, you don't really have any players we want. We know you're not going to give up Surtain, and we
Mhm.
have good corners anyway. We don't necessarily need Surtain. Maybe Dulcich has a little bit of value, but not enough.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be like, we got nothing to talk about unless you're willing to put your 2024 first on the table.
I think it very well could be a reality of it. It very well could be a reality of it. It's like, yeah, you said that late first rounder ain't worth a whole lot, especially this draft, which is with all the guys starting to kind of return back to college a little bit. We're getting quite a few people bounce back. That first round may not be as strong as you'd like with it. So,
Yeah.
Cards get Jim Harbaugh. You buy Jim going down there. He seems like he wants to go to some NFL team one way or come hell or high water. Seems like he's about ready to bounce up out of Michigan.
Really feels like the Denver thing makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Like Jim Harbaugh to Denver, that just they need somebody specific, and he's maybe the only guy they can get that fits that specifically.
I agree. I think that's it. In some ways, you could almost say maybe it's better than Sean, because Sean might try to get Russell more into the high volume passer role and like, well, I'll turn him into Breeze a little bit. And I don't think that Russ has got kind of above the neck up that Breeze did to kind of process that stuff in that way. I don't know if that'd be even though Payton's a better coach than Harbaugh, I do agree. I do think that. I think you're right. I think Harbaugh's probably the best spot there for the Broncos to go in there and to help to maybe reclamate that.
Yeah, and remember, Peyton can't use his coaching dream team if he goes to Denver, probably because he wants Fangio, and Fangio's not going to want to go back to Denver.
No.
So at that point, do you like, okay, here's $20 million extra dollars to not have Vic Fangio?
Yeah. It'd be crazy if they end up having to pay like Peyton something like $40 million a year just to talk him into going to that kind of FUBAR turn sideways situation, like it's just like,
yeah,
all right, if you're gonna throw me all the money, just that'd be an absolute acknowledgement of the fact that he's going to a train wreck and that he's just got to deal with it for a couple of years until they can get to the other side of it, a little bit. Absolutely be indignant. But thank you, Paul. Appreciate the $5 donation. And I could imagine it, man. Oh, he said, imagine if the Rams get Sean Payton. I didn't read that right. We're thinking about Broncos. What if the Rams got Sean Payton? You buying that?
I mean, that situation seems like it's just as bad as Denver at this point, right? Stafford looks like he's going to, I mean, even if Stafford doesn't retire, what is he now after having that serious of an injury?
Mm-hmm. And getting older. He's 35 years old, 36 years old. He's starting to get into that age where it's, stuff is going to start to break down even more so. And he's had his share of injuries through the years. I think Brendan's right on this one too, Paul. The Rams don't have a first round pick this year still, right?
Correct.
And then maybe they get one back next year. So they're going to move.
Have a first round pick next year.
So do you move next year's first for Peyton?
Knowing that your quarterback might be Baker Mayfield and he's going to lead you right to that, top 8 probably.
Yeah. I mean, I can see from Sean saying, I want to be in I like being in LA and that environment, warm weather and all that. Maybe that'd be enough to bring him there with it. But the Rams giving up another first round pick to get him. And again, for a team that looks like it's a little bit into a point where their window started to maybe close a bit. I mean, if Stafford and Donald retire this offseason, does that not change the outlook of that team into the foreseeable future in a major way, Brendan?
Yeah. And even if they don't, what are they going to be going forward? I've said it before. Aaron Donald was not that good this year, even when he was healthy. Cooper Kupp may have peaked. Like that injury may not ever really allow him to get back to exactly what he was. I think they're stuck with Allen Robinson, and that has been a complete disaster. He's got to be there probably at least one more year. Ramsey, I think, is approaching the cliff. I know he had a good game on Sunday. I know he's still had a good year according to PFF, but I think he's approaching the cliff, and they can't really get out from under the contract because of all the money they've spread around. What are they going to do on their offensive line? Are they going to bring back Note Bloom? Is he going to be able to play well? It's really not an appealing situation for a coach.
Yeah. There's some really unappealing. There's always usually when new coaches are being moved out, if you're not always getting the best of situations you're going to, but there are some real extra unappealing situations out there, especially if McVay retires, from Cards, Broncos, Rams. Even the Rams are former Super Bowl winners, just because of we're mentioning all of these extra situations that you're dealing with beyond just having to turn around the hopes of the team and get them back to being a winning program. It's a little bit extra harder. Rams because of their lack of picks in recent years, lack of money. Broncos because the Russell contract. Cardinals because the Russell contract, the lack of talent. It's it's kind of a mess on some of these coaches. They're going to have a lot to do going into these situations.
Yeah. Some people think that Peyton's just going to end up shrugging his shoulders and coaching the Saints again.
I mean, it very well might be if there's not that landing spot that's a nice plum spot. And is there? I mean, is there any of these spots that you look at, Brendan? Because it doesn't look like the Staley's going to get moved, getting into the playoffs for the Chargers, so he probably does remain. I mean, does Peyton look at
until they lose to the Jaguars like 14-10.
That's true. That's true.
I'm speaking it into existence.
That's probably, yeah, it's possible. It's possible it could go that way. How about the Jaguars this year? I mean, maybe Indianapolis, because Indianapolis he could go to and he could say, well, I got to pick where I can get a quarterback. You know, they've got money to spend. They're not behind the same 8 ball as some of those other organizations. You know, the owner's a little bit of a wild child, but he's willing to spend money, and he's got the picks. So
I don't think Carolina's terrible. Not as terrible as I thought. Maybe it's not good, but it's not terrible.
No. I mean, they've got a good defense to build up around. They've got a couple receivers that are interesting. They've got an offensive line that's starting to develop there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot there with that Carolina team that could be interesting as well from his standpoint. He could certainly run his offense down in that southern environment. Nice, good conditions to run kind of more of a pass happy, a little bit of offense. And another team too that I think can package a couple picks, go up and be one of those teams to package picks, get a quarterback in this draft. So they could be just as much one of those teams to jump and do that as well. So I think that, those are probably the better landing spots for Peyton if I'm Sean, rather than these other ones. But
if you go to Carol, well, okay, actually that's a problem. The Saints are not going to trade Peyton to the Panthers, are they?
I mean, maybe not. From their standpoint, though, if he's just going to remain retired and they don't get any draft capital back again, if he decides that I'm just going to stay retired, and then they're looking at the prospect, okay, now another year goes with him out of coaching, are we going to get the same capital next year if he wants to come back into it, or is this our chance right now to strike while the iron's hot? And that this kind of deal is not going to be on the table into the future. I don't know if that would stop them from doing that itself. I think they would still be willing at that point to make the move, because especially being a Saints team, Brendan, let's also acknowledge, no first round pick this year, right? Because they traded away that one to
right. At least they have a foundation though of good players. They got some good players on that team. Dennis Allen was terrible. I think Dennis Allen was just an atrocious coach for them this year more than anything.
Yeah, it's kind of an uninspiring hire. We're just going to elevate the defensive coordinator up. Like, really? That's I don't like
already failed as a head coach.
Yeah, he's failed as a head coach. I'm already not a big fan of in-house hires as it is. I feel like you should be. There's a better candidate that exists out there, not in here. And if we're having problems, and this guy's part of the problems in here that's caused a coach to become, maybe we need, not look within on that one. So we'll see where they go with that. It's a fluid situation though with Peyton. I think it could go a variety of different ways, but I think there's a little bit more steam, like you just said, for him potentially just coming back to New Orleans at this point, with all being how it could break down with it. So thank you, Paul. Appreciate the $5 dono though. Appreciate you're awesome. Magic Vlogs, the $2 donation. Thank you. It says, we ran a jet sweep this week and it worked. Imagine. I got excited by it too.
Yeah, for how little we run it, we fake it a lot. We have a receiver running through the backfield at the snap a lot.
Yeah, we do.
You think anyone falls for it anymore?
No, I don't think, not to the degree that you would if you're playing the Niners with Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
The thing that, this has been one of my big things that gets stuck in my craw now going back a while, right? Because I'm like, every time we run it, we're effective with it. Why do we not run it? I mean, Derek Young, that's all he did at Lenore was run fly sweeps and bubble screens. So like, he's out there, he's on the field already. Like, throw it to him, let him go. He's built to do this stuff. He showed you on that run that he's built to do it. I mean, you could to me throw the Niners off in this game. You just come into this game against the Niners, you choose to run five fly sweeps to Derek Young in this game. I bet you he's got 40 yards rushing on those 5 carries. I bet you catch Niners off guard in that way in this kind of game. And especially again, a game, Magic Vlogs, where you have potentially inclement weather conditions. You've got to manufacture more than ever. And from an offensive standpoint, you got to be more creative than ever from an offensive standpoint. You can't leave that kind of thing on the table again. And look, McVay showed you on the other side of it again here. How many fly sweeps did he run in this last game? He didn't run it quite as many as the first matchup, but still it was a very common element to their offense. It's a base part of this offense. And I continue to wonder why we don't run it more when we are successful in running it. I can understand if we ran it and we were coming up against a brick wall and it failed every time. but it's got like a 95% success rate if you're talking about getting a minimum of 5 yards every time you run it. And if I'm getting 5 yards a rush, I want to lean into that as much as possible, especially because the point Brendon just made is that when you start to really work it, what you're trying to do with that pre-snap motion is all you're trying to do is get those two linebackers there, right? They're behind the ball. You're trying to get them to take a full step this direction so that then eventually you can run back this way. That's what the Niners do. That's at the bread and butter point of their offense. They get those linebackers with the false step. They lose a little bit of natural leverage. You get your blockers with their natural leverage to build off of that. You come back the opposite way and you hammer it. It doesn't necessarily require your blockers then to open up holes or even your second level guard to get to the linebacker, because the linebacker is naturally from his leverage, right? By the time the lineman gets there, his leverage has been, hemmed up a bit on it. So I hope they run it more. What about you on it? How do you feel about it?
Maybe we were saving it for the playoffs.
It's a 4D chess by Carol Magic Vlogs. That's all. He's like, no, we want to hold on to a couple things. We just want to keep a few things in the back pocket for the Niners in the playoffs.
Yeah,
it's possible. I love the thought of that. Remember, Brendon, to your point on this though, hold on. So this is crazy, but to your point on this now, I'm going to take you back. We talked about beast mode game earlier. Do you remember in that beast mode game, something that stood out that was insane is we didn't run bubble screens that whole year. And then we got to that Saints game and that playoffs and that 7-9 game. I think we ran 7 bubble screens to Ben Obomanu over the course of that game. Do you remember that with Matt Hasselbeck throwing those bubbles?
I do remember a lot in that game, but I don't remember specifically that. But I haven't watched that game in a long time. I don't know. I don't like watching old Seahawks games as much as some people seem to do. Even the good ones. I'm like, okay, I know how this ends. It's not that interesting. But I remember like the Brandon Stokely touchdown. I remember, I think Julius Jones fumbled in that game.
The Stokely touchdown set up on a bubble. So what you had there is Stokely goes straight up the field. You're running a fake bubble on that play. And the reason that the Saints bought into it was because you had run like 5 or 6 bubble screens over the course of the game. Yeah. And that's why Staley got open, because Staley wasn't a deep threat guy, right? He's just a slot guy to get open. But it broke open because you had been using it.
Was that the game where John Carlson pretended to fall down and then got back up and caught the touchdown? I remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember bubble screens. I believe you, of course, but I don't remember that. That's wild.
And we didn't do any of it through the year. So that was the part that stood. That's why it sticks in my mind, is that we did none of it during the season. It was like that one game, just like I'm asking us to do the sly sweep thing. You just suddenly unveiled it for the playoffs. Like, the hell with it. Let's go with it. And Matt threw for all these yards, and you were way more pass happy. And I hope Carroll applies that kind of, because part of, I think, why you won that beast mode game Beastquake game was because you were kind of like, hey, nobody thought we were here. It's bonus. We got nothing to lose. Nobody expects anything of us. So let's let it all hang out. Right? Let's throw bubble screens. Let's go fly sweeps. Let's do a little bit of this and that and over. Let's let Matt throw a little bit more. Let's try to like trust it on it. And I like that the same thing this week. If you fail with it, so what? At least you just, you tried. Yeah. You threw it out there. So I hope they lean into it, Magic Vlogs. I really do. I want to see it. Will Valdez with a $10 donation. Thank you, Will. Appreciate you, man. It says 2-part question. If Seattle drafts Anthony Richardson, would it be the best situation for his growth? And are any prospects you see shooting into the top 10 if they flash at the combine? Good questions on both routes. I'm going to let Brendon answer both the questions first, and then I'll dive in. Let's start with the first question. Okay. If we draft Anthony Richardson, would this be the best situation for his growth?
I mean, that's really hard to know because we've never seen Waldron get a young quarterback with no experience and then mold him. It would be a pretty good situation, but my thing with Richardson is it feels like he might be 2 or 3 years away because he was bad in college. This is not a Josh Allen situation where Josh Allen was just okay. No, Richardson actually was bad. He flashed, he has talent. We all know the cool stuff he can do, but like he was actually bad, and I feel like he might be 2 or 3 years away. If we got AR-15, I would feel optimistic about it. I wouldn't be like, oh no, Waldron's going to ruin this. No, I would be like, yeah, let's go. I think this can work.
I think your point is the key point to this best situation for him, Will, is what Brendan just talked about. And it almost doesn't matter what team he goes to. And it sounds like a straightforward thing that's like, well, yeah, duh, but it's also something that's very hard for NFL teams to actually pull off when it comes to theory and plans first. Oh, we're in the season. The hell with the plans. And that is that you got to give this guy 2 years. He's going to need 2 years to get to where he's going to go. And if you're going to get impatient, if you're going to try to throw him out there too early, he's going to probably fail at that because he is just not ready. Like Brendan said, he's got a lot to kind of clean up in his game. I think it's the right situation if you commit to the 2 years. Re-signing Geno, I think would be a big step to helping that because now you're not going to be as you're not going to get that itchy feeling as much of if you have, let's say, maybe a untested guy that might fail out like a lock if you brought him back. And well, if he fails out, now we got to go Richardson. You have a little more of a known quotient there in Geno, which probably then has you sit in that 2-year plan and just stay patient with it. But that's the key with it, Will, is you've got to give this guy 2 years. It's the same thing I see with, and again, it sounds straightforward, but go look at Niner fans right now talking about Trey Lance. There are so many Niner fans out on Trey Lance. And I said at the start when he was drafted, he was my second favorite quarterback in that class that came out with Lawrence. But I also said with that, you've got to give the kid 2 years. He dominated at 20 years or 19 years old. He dominated season, and he sat for a season. He was not ready to go. But these fans get impatient. They like, well, we draft him in the first round, get him out there, come on. And it's very hard to do, but that's the requirement here. And if you don't do it, he might have a good chance of failing out and busting. If he's getting those 2 years, I've got a lot of actual confidence in Anthony Richardson after those 2 years being a really good player in this league. But he does need that time to get it right.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
What about the second question here? Are there any prospects you see shooting into the top 10 if they flash at the combine?
Well, I mean, let me think here. One guy we've been talking about a lot at my streams lately was Quentin Johnston, but he had such a bad national title game, maybe not. But he's a guy who's probably going to test really well, and he may end up being a top 10 pick. Honestly, and maybe this is just me hoping, if Kyler Murray's pounding the table for more offensive weapons, does Arizona consider taking Johnston at 4?
No.
Okay.
Because Kyler hasn't earned any right to be able to pound any tables. Like he's earned the right to go sit in the corner and have a dunce cap on his head. They also just traded a first-round pick for Hollywood Brown last year. That's after making the previous year a second-round pick on Rondale Moore. And the previous year from that, you'd given up a second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins, if I'm not mistaken. The year before that, I think you had gone Danny Isabella in the second round, I think, as well. So there's been a lot of put over on the side of that receiving core to a pretty significant degree. I don't know if they can afford to add more on top of it. To me, if they're not trading out of the pick, taking Will Anderson to me is the straightforward one there for them because they need edge help desperately. No Chandler Jones. No, I mean, Marcus Golden's like their best pass rusher right now. It needs a help there. And that's the guy that to me that is the straightforward, help. I've got a couple names of guys that could shock on this. I think Tyree Wilson of Texas Tech is going to test very well. I think he's Julius Peppers minus 20 pounds.
Yeah,
So,
I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit here. I think he already is in the top 10.
oh, okay. There we go.
I think if the draft was today, he's top 10. And a combine could actually, I think we might get to our pick at 5 now, and he might be the best player available by the time the draft comes around.
It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. And it wouldn't surprise me the least, Brendan. And you might be right on that, where he's already kind of ready to go. I think it's a very strong possibility. A couple other names I give you on this one. How about Brian Brees of Clemson, who, if he tests well and comes off that ACL, right? With that, he could be a guy that jumps in there. I think Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson goes out and runs a 4.37 40. Does he push himself up into that territory of things? He's looked at as one of the most talented backs to come out in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. A lot of people believe Philly will take him with the Saints pick. So he's right on the cusp already, if you believe that.
Yep. And I could see that with that one on that one. I would go with 2 other names that would be outside surprises on this one. One would be Sealy Ringo, which I think that there's not a definite that he's in a top 10, but he's a guy once he tests well, he's going to run probably a 4.4 and he's going to jump and be explosive and all that stuff. So he's really going to jump up, I think, to a big degree. And then I've got one more name on this, which would be, here's my shocker on this one. He's rising up my board right now, which is Brian Branch. Brian Branch could eventually do enough to top. He's rising with a bullet right now up the draft boards, and a guy that I initially had as sort of almost a second round pick guy when I first looked at him. But then the more tape I watched on him, Brendon, and the more I read about him, the more I went, this guy might be able to push himself up into top 10. He can play slot corner for you, and he can play safety for you. So he bring and play them both great. So not just play them, but play both of those positions at a really high level. That could propel him.
Did you see the PFF mock that they released recently?
Mm-mm.
They had him going to Carolina at their pick at, I think, 8.
Oh my God. Carolina's gone so cornerback heavy lately. I'd like, that'd be kind of shocking to me to see them go back into that well again, right? With the CJ Andersons and the JC Horns. And I think they got one other guy they just drafted there, but I could see it with him. He's a unique cap, Brendon. Usually if you drop to strong safety, you got a strong safety. Usually if you're going to get a slot corner, he's a slot corner. You're not going to usually get both of those two kind of positions. And that's helpful for a defense to be able to move a guy around like that and know that he's going to give you great play at either of the two spots. And there's nothing he can't do. He's a great tackler. He can jump a route and pick the ball off. So he's a guy that I think is going to, I don't know if he'll get quite in the top 10, but he's certainly a guy that if he goes out into the combine and runs really fast, he's got long arms. He's legit 6 feet tall. He's going to test probably pretty well. So that'd be my collection for you, Will. I could see all those guys going in there. I think it's pretty fluid, Brendon, isn't it? Once you get past the 5 guys at the top, that next 5 guy list point is kind of not as certain at this point as to who's going to be where and what's going to be what. It's not as clear as it was like last year was a little more clear to me, right? Like you kind of knew that the 3 tackles that were going to go in the top 12 picks, you knew Thibodeau was going to go, Aiden was going to go. Walker wasn't number 1 overall, but you knew he was going to be probably a top 12 guy. This year, it's not as much to me. It feels like it's a little more uncertain on the other, from 5 to 12. I'm really not sure at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you, though, Will. Appreciate the donation, man. You're very kind for doing so. Let me see what else got up here. Oh, Barry Satoro. What's up, Barry? Thank you, man. Appreciate you and appreciate the $5 donation. Good to see you in the chat. Says Sean Payton is perfect for LA. He has the best cap manipulators. Going from one manipulating organization to another, huh, Brendon?
Yeah.
Well, he's used to it at least, I guess.
Yeah. You know? One thing I would say, though, is that I feel like Mickey Loomis, all that cap manipulation has kind of been a disaster. Like they haven't been to a Super Bowl, and he kept doubling down to the point where he literally gave up his first round pick this year for Trevor Penning. Like I actually, is he a bad GM? Is he just is the reason why people think he's a good GM is because he's insane?
I think that's one of those things where you can be good at general managing in one aspect of things, and then you can be bad in another aspect of things. I think he's pretty good about his player evaluations and how they draft. I think has been very solid over the years, including that 2017 draft, which is one of the better ones we've seen probably in the last 15 years. But then I think your point on the cap manipulations and his use of cap and deciding to go for it every year and go for it in a way that continues to just prolong the pain, add to the cap problems, rather than just out and out have a year where you clear the deck, you come back to scratch one, and then you kind of restart things forward. And Sean Payton moving on last year was the perfect opportunity for he had everything built in to do that at that time. You can come back to ownership and look, Breeze retired, Sean Payton's retired. We're at a point now where we got to kind of turn this over and get this back around again. And I think ownership would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. And instead you did what they did, which is, to continue to go all in. And then, like you said, it also drove them to a desperate trade. And yeah, that does knock him down quite a bit for me, Brendon. As I say, one of the most important things a team can do, this is one of my big things, is you've got to know what you are as a team. And if you're an in-between team, not truly an elite team, not an ascending team, but you're that in-between team, and they've been the definition of an in-between team over the last few years, you can't stay in that spot. And when you keep pushing the can down the road, that's just what you're going to do, is keep yourself further longer held down in that area where you can't move left, you can't move right. You're just stuck in what you are.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Sean Payton would be, he'd certainly be used to it, Barry. He's used to saying, hey, Sean, yeah, we're going the off season. Okay, that's great. We're just only about 75 million over the cap though right now. Like he isn't going to, crap his pants at that point. He'll be like, oh, it's only 75? In New Orleans, we used to go 120. That's nothing. That's nothing. We can get around that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barry. Appreciate you though, man. Alexander Wheeler with a $5 donation. Is it dumb to think they might have saved the more nuanced offensive stuff for the playoffs and only used it against the Rams because it was a must win?
I would argue that you kind of had must-win games against teams like the Panthers. teams like, well, the Chiefs. Now the Chiefs are a different animal, whatever. I'm not going to hold that against them. Like the Chiefs are really, really
Yeah.
good. But this was beyond must win because you needed help. You got the help. But I look back at some of the games that we lost and I was like, we had the ability to control our own destiny. So if that's what the team was doing, that is a little bit questionable. I don't believe that's the case. I think that especially when you have a coach like Pete, you're doing whatever you can to win every game you play. You know you're not going to win every game. But I do think that I don't think Pete's holding anything back. Now, maybe like the bubble screen example you were talking about, they come up with something fun, different for this game, but I don't think you hold back your good plays.
Yeah, I don't think so either on this one, Alexander. I think if you're a team like maybe the Niners the last couple of weeks, and knowing where you are and you have the division hemmed up, that's a team that's in a position to go, maybe we don't show some stuff that we want to keep in our back pocket for the playoffs at that point. But when you're a team like us that's scraping, scratching, clawing, fighting, poking eyes out, doing whatever you can to get to the playoffs, then at that point, you've got to kind of leave it all on the table, especially as a team that's as young as this, that's been as inconsistent as they've been throughout kind of the course of the year with some of the ups and downs. I just can't think that I just can't think that the coaching staff went into that Raiders game or went into that Carolina game and went, we got this. Let's just hold on to some stuff for the playoffs because we're gonna get in the playoffs in the back end, and then they just got caught off guard that they lost the games. Let's say, I can't think they operated with that kind of confidence with this particular team, especially as they was playing how they were playing on the back half of the schedule, because we weren't playing our best football either. Maybe we're talking about the first part of the year was on the back half of the year. Maybe you could apply that there, Alexander, but being that you had the struggles on the back half, probably unlikely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you though for the $5 donation, man. And I do hope, like what Brendon said, there is maybe that doesn't hold you back then from maybe having a couple of wrinkles that you can impart in a big way this week that catches them off guard because you haven't shown it on film. That wouldn't be you holding anything back. That's just you necessarily now leaning on something a little more heavily than you've leaned on throughout the course of the year, and like they did with that bubble screen game in the Saints contest back in the day. Garth, that with a $5 donation. Thank you, Garth. Says, don't run it. Just assume the other defense is too fast without trying.
I mean, a lot of college teams do that basically, right? Like it works for them.
It does. Certainly, yeah. It's working at the college game on that for sure. But the other, just assume the other defense is too fast without trying. we're gonna have to run in the cyclone, Garth. In a cyclone with that rainy weather, you can't throw it 40 times. It's too hard to be accurate. It's too hard to catch the ball. There's those throws, especially in the short intermediate attacks in West Coast offense. You got to sometimes throw that ball in with some pepper. And to do that in wet conditions on a receiver who's got to catch a 6-yard route with Geno cranking up the RPMs, that's how you get those balls bouncing then out of the hands of the receivers and then tipped up and then picked off and caught and ran back the other way.
Yeah, lately the NFL loves their neutral sites so much. Maybe the cyclone gets so bad we can petition the NFL to move this game to a neutral location.
That'd be okay. I feel cool about that. If I wasn't like the Niner fans already don't get very loud and they're pretty low key as far as the crowds go in those stadiums. They're just kind of like watching silently.
It's your fault. You built a bad stadium.
They did build that stadium. It's on them, man. And they built it out in the middle of nowhere from San Francisco as well. So it's a bit of both of that. So
the Field of Jeans. Levi Stadium.
Little Jeans. That's awesome. What a silly name. Thank you, Garth, for the $5 dono, though. I think you're going to see a lot of running this week, man. A lot of running. Kevin Mullen with a $5 donation. Thank you, Kevin. Says, has Clint Hurt, Sean Desai earned to keep their jobs for next year? And if not, should we make a push for Denver's DC Avero if he's available? What do you think on that one, brother?
Well, I mean, I can't say they've earned their jobs because the defense has been bad. I will say it's been better the last month. They played better against the Niners and Chiefs, and then they actually played good against the Jets and the Rams. That gives me a little bit of hope. There's some stuff going on with this defense that I do not believe comes from Hurt and Desai that has really inhibited their ability to be good. So I don't mind bringing him back. I'm not going to be sad if I hear right after the season ends the Seahawks have fired Clint Hurt. Because, the defense was bad, but I don't really think it's his fault. And we don't even really know what Desai does, so it's hard for me to evaluate that. I can't believe Evero would be available for another DC job. He's either going to stay in Denver or be a head coach, right?
I would think so. I also don't think that with his star rising as it is, Brendan, I don't think that there's any defensive coordinator, this is a Fangio, for instance, would never come to Seattle because he's not going to want to be underneath Coach Carroll. Is Evero going to want to be under Coach Carroll? Because it's not just that you're under a head coach. Yeah, all defensive coordinators are under a head coach. You're under a head coach that could actively be at times overruling you, supplanting you, telling you what to do, to where now it's not really your defense, it's kind of his defense. But it's your name on it, and that's where it gets hard to necessarily bring in those prime candidates when they have to face that. Because if I fail, I want to fail on my merits. I don't want to fail on the merits of a head coach telling me half the time what I got to be doing. It's very, very hard, as Brendan said, to make an assessment on Desai or Hurt from my standpoint of things. And I think we as fans have got to be very careful to be putting the blame on defensive coordinators here with the performance of this defense this year. When we look at this, when we can look at the recent history, and you did this before with Richard, you did this before with Norton. You've been down this road before of trying to sort of blame what I would call the patsy here, rather than really pointing the finger on where it needs to go if it's a problem. And I'm not saying it's a problem, but look, the defense was bad this year. It's been bad for the last 3 years. I think that there's a fix here that's easier to be made than having to go get a new defensive coordinator. How about you just adopt the scheme that you changed over to this offseason fully, not partially, not piecemeal, not an amalgamation, not a hybrid, but you actually run the defense that you brought the guys in to run, like Desai. Because Desai got a really good, a really, really lowly talented Bears defense to play really good football running the purified cover 2 Vic Fangio scheme. And that's what people say. It's like, well, Fangio's scheme doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't work. It works when it's being run right, and it's got the personnel that fits it. And that's I would say those two parts were missing this year, not just the personnel that fit it, but also that you're actually running the scheme right. And so it's more about less than getting another coach in here, Kevin. To me, it's more about just run the scheme more pure, and then you'll get better benefits from it. Get better personnel in here that fits the scheme better. You'll get better returns from it, and none of those have to do with anything as far as the DCs go. Right. Garth Knight with a $10 donation. Thank you for the double dono, Garth. And again, I hope you're having a good night out there, man. It is good to see you in the chat. Says no rookie quarterback gets a week. No rookie quarterback gets a week, let alone 2 seasons this day and age. It's ridiculous, but Josh Allen might be the last cat to get management to suffer the ebbs and flows of patience and growth.
Great point. Partially this was because all the quarterbacks got drafted later, but did any rookie quarterbacks start week 1 this season?
No.
Yeah, because Ritter didn't start till like week 13. Pickett was behind Trubisky. Malik never started except for that one game. Yeah, so granted, none of those guys are very good. That's a big part of the reason why. But we did see some amount of patience with some of these guys.
But probably none of them are getting 2 years, right? I mean, like you mentioned, Malik, he'll get 2 years, but only because they probably bailed on him at that point, right? Not because they're like, well, just give him the time to develop.
The thing is, if somebody takes AR-15 in the top 10, and there are people out there who swear he's going top 10, there's no way that team is going to be patient with him because they're bad. They're like, we need help now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Garth, you're absolutely on point with this one in the respect of this is one of those situations I'd say, what's the reality versus what really is the ideal and what teams should do. And you're right. Teams don't have that patience anymore. And that's been proven out over and over again when there is a guy that is highly talented. If you're going to take a guy, especially in the first round, Brendan, he's playing that year. It's a way you're not going to get a half season through. They were with Trubisky for about 6 games and they went, okay, now it's time for Pickett. So you're not going to get the 2 seasons. You're right about that, but it should, and he needs that. And he's coming out a year early, and he would have probably needed a year then to sit on the bench in the NFL after having another year of college production. So he does require that, does Richardson, but you're absolutely right, Garth, in that's not the way this modern NFL goes, and that you don't get that time to sit on the bench. You're expected to get out there as soon as possible. Guys, their jobs are on the line, coaches and general managers, so they're going to want to see what they got with it. But it's kind of silly because you see a lot of these guys go out there at times and they're just not ready to go, and they're being forced out there to try to validate something that has nothing to do with them or their progression or their process or their development as a player. It's definitely the place a lot of NFL organizations go. That's the wrong route. You can even make that move. You can even make that argument with a guy like Kyler Murray coming out. Was it best for him to just start immediately right out the gate? Was that the right move? Maybe. He didn't have a lot of college play, right? He had the 1 year of college production behind, and then after Baker Mayfield left there in Oklahoma, I think sitting, I know there's a bit of controversial point. Some people say you don't want to sit, you want them to get out there and play because that's how they learn. But I think that there's some benefit, especially a young guy that hasn't played a lot, to sit and learn. You're muted.
Every situation is going to be different. Like, a guy like Andrew Luck, I had no problem with him starting day one. That made all the sense in the world to me.
No, totally.
But another guy from, I think, that draft class, Christian Ponder, I remember thinking, that's a guy who could really use some time.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think any amount of time could have saved that guy. But
No.
I remember thinking, like, it's a bad idea to play him quickly.
But it was like a double edge to your point. That's like the double edge is like he was never going to be probably good enough, but then he also needed time to develop. And so you really set him in a bad way to not only take a guy that you didn't give time to develop, but then you wasn't probably good enough from a physical standpoint to get the job done, either. It is odd how impatient they get, especially with a lot of these situations, Brendan. You'll hear the general manager and coach talk when they draft the guy about needing to be patient with him, about understanding that he's not ready to go right now. And, they'll say all the platitudes that you hear. And then week 4 comes and it's like, get him out there. And you go, oh, geez, remember the offseason? You guys talking about, you needing to be patient with the guy and not jump to quick conclusions on it, So.
Yeah. Also, I'm sorry, real quick. Do we have a mod in the stream chat, please? Are there any mods active right now? We have somebody spamming the same comment over and over, and it's.
I got him actually here. Hold on.
Yeah. Thank you.
I got him, guys. He's gone. Bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ethan Cogleta, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, do we need a new center in 2024? Free agency or draft? Go Hawks. Thank you, Ethan. Appreciate it.
I think we have a center under contract in 2020, this upcoming season. So yeah, we do.
Yeah, it's this is a big need for this team, Ethan. And if I'm putting the needs of this team out there right now, I'd probably put defensive line as first, but I would probably even above right guard because I can find a right guard somewhere. Centers are getting harder and harder to find. The quality of them coming out in the draft's getting harder and harder to find at times. I'd put center as maybe the number 2 priority on the list. I would. There's not a lot in free agency, Ethan. You're going to have Mitch Morse, and that's going to be about it out there on the open market. In the draft, there's a couple of guys, though, that are interesting that certainly could be Seahawks targets. So likely probably the draft is where they go. But, Ethan, you can't just bring back Austin Blythe. He's been a problem for us in the interior. And it's as simple as this. Like Brendan talked about, too. Carroll wants to run up the middle. That's a base part of his DNA philosophy on an offense and how he wants the offense to run. It's part of why I lament so much we don't use the fly sweeps or the outside pitch plays, despite having a guy in Walker who's an outside pitch machine. Or, a guy should be working him to the edges. Same thing with Penny. I mean, they said they made the same problem with Penny, too. We're going to turn Penny into an inside runner. Oh, okay. I guess that works. So if you're going to be that kind of team that's committed in that way to running up the middle, then you're going to need to have the center up there that can get the work done, who can sometimes one-on-one take a zero tech and drive him out of the hole, who on his double team blocks can be dominant in that element and get guys driven out the hole with the guards on the other side of it, who can pull in space and use his athleticism because you need mobile centers in this scheme. So you got to go find it, Ethan. They're going to go find it, I think. It's going to be probably one of those 2 second-round picks, I would bet. They tried last year to get Linderbaum in the draft, but they couldn't trade up and get him. The cost was going to be too great to move up and get Linderbaum, who had a really good year in his first season. But yeah, I do expect them to address it, and I think that they recognize they have to. They have in the past too, right? Like they have gone second-round pick before for a guy like Ethan Posick. Even a guy like Justin Britt was a former second-round pick. So
hey, you just said his name. You just said Ethan Posick. So how about that? He's a top 5 center now. Dude had a phenomenal year in Cleveland. I feel very vindicated right now because I've always been kind of a passive Posick defender.
Yeah.
Do we go get Ethan Posick this offseason?
What's the cost?
I don't know. He cost the Browns like $1 million, but he had a really good year. I mean,
he's costing you probably $7 million a year.
If he plays like he played in Cleveland, I'm doing that all day.
You don't have any worries about the injury history?
Not really. I think the last 2 years he was here, he missed 2 games with a concussion. And in Cleveland, I don't think he's missed a game yet.
No, I think I'd be in the market for doing it. I don't want to pay him over like the $10 million a year off the 1 year he's had. It's got to be in that place of, look, here's where you've been for the most of your career. We got to find that. It's like the Geno situation. We got to find this place that makes sense for both player and team. Not simply like you had your great year, now you got to get your career deal and like no. That's where I would be a little bit hesitant with that. But yeah, considering Brendan, There's not a lot of centers on the market. It would open you up then for the draft to not have to be locked into taking a center early. So that just frees up the BPA situation on those picks through the first 2 rounds, which, that's my big thing on drafts that I love doing. So if you get that position to do that by taking a guy like Posick, I'm with you. I was never anti Posick. His injury stuff bothered me, and that every year he's got something that's dinged up on, it seemed like. But I also didn't like the fact that they played him out of position through his first couple of years. He was not a guard. He was a center. That's where they should have had him from day one and left him there, quite frankly.
Yeah, I was always happy when he got hurt because he was so bad at guard. At least it got him off the field.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, it's Ethan, we're going to address this, though. You can bet your Hawks are going to do something there. You're not rocking back just with Austin Blythe and Kyle Fuller. We will be bringing somebody else in here. And is Joey Hunt still on our practice squad?
No, I don't think so. Well, maybe he is. I mean, he's on the practice squad. You certainly wouldn't hear about that every week.
No, you definitely wouldn't. I wonder if he is. I got to look that up and see if he is still there. Joey Hunt. Chris Clark, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you, man. And welcome to Hawks Nest. Says, do you think they will draft defensive players to fit and run the Fangio scheme? What do you think on this one, Brendon?
That's the scheme you're going to run, you would certainly hope so. I mean, we need defensive players. There are definitely some guys in this draft who I think make sense for the Fangio scheme. You've got the opportunity to get some really good defensive linemen. You've got the opportunity to maybe get some there are some safeties in this draft that I like. You may not be able to get any of them, admittedly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would expect so. I mean, it would be sure weird if you didn't after trying to implement it.
Yeah, I would hope that they're looking to take these steps, Chris. Of course, I've leaned to one to get a guy like Jalen Carter with the first pick or Miles Murphy to the first pick, because I think both of those two guys would take you into the step and direction of starting to go down that path. You got to do more. There's obviously you need a zero tech. You need two. I wouldn't even count Shelby Harris as like a starter. I'd say I'd want to try to find 2 starter defensive ends as well in addition to that. So it's in a lot of respects, you need to find essentially 3 guys on that defensive line to make the Fangio scheme work. Specifically, if it's a zero tech, Chris, we need a zero tech that can take 2 blockers up. We've got too much of our zero techs out there, and centers can take them on one-on-one, and then you've got double blocks on other guys at that point blowing holes out. So you've got to get a zero tech in there that can command that presence. In many ways, the 3-4 defense is built, say nothing of Fangio's scheme, just a 3-4 defense, and its success is oftentimes built around having a good zero tech in the middle controlling the action. You also then need the defensive ends on the outside that are more pure and more talented than what we've thrown out there, specifically for the most of the year, Quentin Jefferson and Poona Ford. That's been a big place where, you've taken a step back when those guys have been on for most. Like you said on Quentin, he's played better recently, but for most of the year wasn't good. And so that's really where I think you can, beyond finding different secondary players and all of that, Chris, and finding that sort of stuff where linebackers that fit, it's that. You've got the outside linebackers to make the scheme work. Really, at the end of the day, with Fangio's scheme, it's just that front to me. Let me see if you agree with this. Yeah, you need a middle linebacker too. So I think you need a middle linebacker, but it's really the front for me, Brendon. Get the talent in on the front. That's the talent portion that we need on this defense. And then it's the secondary and the coverages you play in the back end, and then the willingness to be more pressure-based, which is the adaptations that you need to bring on in the Fangio scheme. Is that fair from your standpoint?
I agree with that. I mean, it's doable in this draft. I've started not as much as you, but I have started looking at these guys in the draft. I do believe it is doable. Mm-hmm. You can at least make this team a lot better. And I agree. I don't know if we have a single starting quality defensive lineman on this team right now. Like they are starting because someone has to, but I don't. Maybe Al Woods, but he can't play that much anymore. So
no,
probably not even him.
Very limited on the snaps. And I think he was wearing down as this year went down, as understandably so, being a 35-year-old cat with as much run as he's had over the last couple of years here. So it's really get the defensive lineman, get a middle linebacker, Chris, and you've gotten the defensive players to fit the scheme. And then you just need to adapt the scheme. And the 2 places to do it is you ran on the back end of your coverages. You ran cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, which is great. At least they added in cover 4 this year. But I want a little more of the quarters. I want a little bit, maybe more of some Mabel coverage where you're cover 3 to one side, your man to another, a little bit of more man principles, maybe at times here and there where you can kind of implement, not all the time, just as a sprinkling in of a difference, right? Becoming a little more exotic, a little more different, snap in and snap out what you're showing defensively with the thought process, Chris, because this is what Fangio's scheme does at the end of the day, in my opinion, is that it confuses the quarterback. And so you're looking with the scheme to confuse and throw the quarterback off pre-snap versus what they're going to see post-snap. And that's more of just adapting the scheme than it is to bring in the players, because I think the secondary guys can make that work. But I appreciate you, Chris. Thank you so much. Chef Russ to Clutch with a $2 donation says, should Seattle trade up or down with the number 5 pick, Brendon?
Well, I don't think we're trading up, so I don't even really feel the need to have that conversation, even if you could argue that we should. And I don't think we should.
No.
But I don't believe Schneider has that in his playbook.
Yeah, I agree with you. Chef Russ, the fact that Schneider's gone 10, 12 years here without ever trading up, especially when they're those years where I know he was lamenting the fact he didn't like he was picking in the 20s, right? He didn't trade up in those years where there might have been a little bit more of an impetus to do so at that point. So I think with him already sitting on 5 and the picks he has, with the success that they had last year, just standing pat and taking their picks and taking their selections, I don't think that there's even I would even put a 5% chance on us moving up in this draft. I'd put probably less than 1%. I mean, I just don't think it's possible. Trading back, yes. Maybe
So.
Maybe. I don't think John's going to trade back to 15 out of 5. I think he's going to want to stay in the top 10 if he does move back. I think he's going to stay in that tier 1 tier. What do you think on that?
Yeah. So here's kind of what I see right now. So there are a couple different ways the top of the draft can go, but let's say it goes Colts trade up to number 1 to get CJ Stroud.
Okay.
And then number 2 is the Texans. They get Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 and 4 in some order, probably Jalen Carter, Will Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
So you look for the team that has fallen in love with Will Levis. You know there's going to be a team. We both know it. I know some of you guys in the chat don't like Will Levis. I get it. But somebody's going to fall in love with him. I'm looking at the Panthers. I'm looking at the Raiders. And I'm looking at even maybe the Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out who loves him enough to overpay to trade up to get him and trade with that team. You're still picking in the top 10. I think at that point you could still get Brian Breeze. You could get Tyree Wilson. You're going to get somebody like that, not Jalen Carter, but somebody who's really, really good.
Somebody still in the tier 1 area of things.
Yeah.
Tier 1 talent area of things.
Yeah. That's one of the paths I want this draft to go. The other path would be the Bears trading back out of the top 5. Maybe a team like the Panthers says, screw it. We want CJ Stroud. We don't care what we give up. Let's get up to number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might have a situation where Stroud, Young, and Levis go in the top 4. That way you get to poach whatever defender is left between Anderson and Carter at 5. But if Carter and Anderson are gone, I'm definitely strongly considering trading back at 5.
Yes, I'm the same place as you are on that. If those guys are out at that point, especially to your point on the Levis thing, in your situation it plays out. I think your second way that you talked about that other path, that's the way I do think it does play out. Where I look at the Colts and go, do you want to give up a first round pick to move up to number 1 if you can still get your quarterback essentially at 4 and maybe not Stroud, but you're getting a Levis. If they like Levis enough, that's close enough on that where they go, well, it's close enough. We don't want to give that first round pick, especially because we don't know if we'll be good next year. We might be giving this Bears team a top 5 pick next year on top of that if we make that kind of move for standing pat. Versus those other teams you mentioned that feel a little more quarterback hungry to me. The Panthers feel quarterback hungry to me. The Falcons don't seem like they're sold completely on Ritter, quarterback hungry. I think that there's a lot of those quarterback hungry teams that'll be willing to do, and that's what it takes is really like 3 or 4 teams that can kind of now compete against each other to move up. Now you can actually get your draft pick compensation to move back that meets your mark and what you're wanting and what Schneider's wanting. So I think that does have that chance of playing out, but I still do maintain that I think Chicago moves out of 1, stays in the top 10. You see 3 quarterbacks essentially taken in the first 4 picks, and then we get our pick of one of the leftover top best defenders in this draft between Anderson and Carter. And I would be perfectly fine with that, Brendon.
Yeah, there are a lot of good paths here. Like people were like in my Discord, people were just like dying in the streets. It was like mass hysteria when Denver was winning that game. But I'm like, guys,
dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's like, guys, this pick was supposed to be in the 20s. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm the same way with it, where I'm like, it's a top 5 pick. I had a Denver Bronco fans going like, ooh, we won. We threw your whole thing off. Like, oh, so now we're picking 5 instead of 3.
Yeah.
Why
would a Broncos fan even care?
Oh, they've been, because I did that heist of the century video, and I turned Russell Wilson's face into a lemon, and yeah, I triggered a couple Bronco fans. They've come in on the comment a little bit, like a little bit of fiery on it. Like, I can't blame them. I get it. But yeah, I think what it is too, Brendan, is I think that you also touched on this a little bit. Will Levis has as much hate as one of the top quarterbacks I've seen in a draft from the Seahawks fandom, as any recent quarterback coming out. I don't know what to make of it. There's a lot of folks. It ain't a small contingent. It's a large contingent. It's like, I hate him. No, I hate him. Maybe it's because he put mayonnaise in his coffee. Maybe it's because he eats bananas whole. I don't know. But whatever it is, he has that. And I think that's what happened, Brendan, is when they looked at that pick, they went, oh, well, now Anderson and Carter absolutely have to be picked ahead of us now. It goes without saying, because the first two quarterbacks will be picked and they'll be picked, and then we'll be left with nothing at that point. And that's where I like you're trying to maintain as well. It's like, folks, Levis is going to be picked high. There is going to be a team that loves him, and you may not love him, but as I've tried to maintain, your evaluation personally may be completely right. You may be like the quarterback whisperer of your understanding of quarterback talent and be way ahead of the mark on that. But the NFL franchises aren't necessarily in that same place. And that's what at the end of the day is going to matter on this, is that there will be the teams that do like him, that do fall in love with him, that do say, yeah, that's our quarterback of the future. He's got everything that we checks every single box that we're looking for from a potential quarterback prospect. And so that will end up making the fact that we drop from 3 to 5, in my opinion, Brendan, and your opinion too on this. And hopefully we can give maybe some Seahawks fans some calmness on this, and that will be what helps. That will be what helps here. The fact that Levis's stock rises in the way it does will be the thing that then helps the Seahawks to having an opportunity to still get Carter or Anderson. And that's probably why people were freaking out, is they aren't quite putting those two and two together, you know.
And by the way, the other path, I still really like Miles Murphy. So there's that too.
Yeah, Miles is fine as a consolation prize. So yeah, these are two of the best defenders in Anderson and Carter, but it isn't like you're getting chopped liver if you happen to, you know, go to the next rung down on that. It's absolutely not chopped liver. So thank you though, Chef Russ to Clutch. We almost got caught up here on the donos here, Brendan. Let me get another one down here. Mr. Kane, my brother from another mother. Ooh, I like that. I like his emoji there. Boy, those throwbacks next year. I'd love the throwbacks in this game if we could do it. Wouldn't that be awesome? Come out in the throwbacks.
Yeah, we literally can't do it, or we're just choosing not to.
We can't, I guess. We still have to wait that 1 year to be able to do it. But boy, those would look sweet on Saturday if we could rock those, man. And Walker is going to look good in those next year. People are going to love those. The kids are going to love those jerseys, Brendan. When they see those jerseys on our guys, they're going to want to see those jerseys like every week. Like, those are bad ass. Mr. Kane, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, any interest in A'Shawn Robinson trade? Go Hawks.
That's the 0 tech or 1 tech on the Rams, isn't it?
That is indeed.
Not really. Would they trade him in the division unless they know something's really wrong with him? Like that's kind of my thing. Like, I remember when Andy Reid traded Donovan McNabb to inside the division. Like, that was a very strong indication to me that Andy Reid knew that McNabb had nothing left. So if the Rams were willing to trade A'Shawn Robinson to us, I'd say they must know something about him. So not really.
Yeah, I'm checking out right now. Boy, he's got looks like he's just about to be out of his contract. So he's just looks like he's a free agent to me. So they've got some dead money voidable years on his deal, but right now their 2023 cap, as far as according to Sports Track on this, Mr. Kane, is that they don't have any. He would just be a street free agent, and if he's a street free agent, am I interested in him? Yeah, sure. He's not going to cost a lot of money. He's really not going to give you a lot as a pass rusher. He's there to stop the run, take up space. He's a fit for a 3-4 defense. He has scheme familiarity. He's played in the Fangio scheme. So that's not going to be like he doesn't know what he needs to do with the gap and a half stuff on the defensive line. So he'd be a fit, and he wouldn't cost a lot of money to bring him in at that point. I'd be on board with it. I wouldn't want to do a trade with the Rams on it. For, like Brendan said, you're not going to get a player traded in the division. If you are, there's probably a reason for it, broken goods. And then even if you do pull the trade off, you're probably going to have to give up too much capital for the guy at that point to make the team willing to trade within their own division. So just too many things within that go, well, just ain't going to quite add up on that one. But for agency, Mr. Kane, yeah, you better believe it. I'd be all over him in that. That's guy definitely would fit. It's just a good, solid player comes in. He's not going to be a star, but again, I was talking to Brendan on this earlier too, Mr. Kane. It's to me about that rotation. Brendan had that great stat that he brought up about the Super Bowl year and you not having any linemen running more than 33% of the snaps in that Super Bowl season.
That wasn't percent. It was like 33 snaps.
Right, 33 snaps. So, but it was like they were less than 40% of the snaps at that point, 33 snaps.
Right around there, yeah.
So it still is, to me, that's That's the important part here is we're looking to find and we're looking to build, Mr. Kane, the rotation. And you do that with a multitude of guys, not just one or two or three, but we really do that multitude of guys. But if you went out and got like Deron Payne, Ashawn Robinson, and Jalen Carter, well, you've revamped your defensive line really quickly with just those three guys alone right there out the gate.
Right.
$5 donation from Pedro Mendoza. Thank you, Pedro. I really do appreciate it. Says, hey, do you think Joey Blunt can get a bigger role next year?
I mean, he didn't really have a role outside of special teams this year, so I'd say probably a little bigger than that. But I think Diggs is going to stick around, so his spot is filled. Jamal's going to come back next year, I believe, and at least start the year. And if he gets hurt, I kind of feel like we bring back Abram. He's like the poor man's Jamal Adams. That just makes sense to me. Let's keep him around.
Yeah, I could see them doing that as well. And remember with Joey Blunt, Pedro, he was an undrafted rookie free agent guy. So he's not necessarily a really hugely talented guy that you bring out there. I think they probably bring him back from the depth for just the depth standpoint of things and to round it out, especially with Adams being a little bit of an unknown there. He is only a strong safety in Joey Blunt. I don't think he can really play free safety stuff, single high kind of stuff. I don't think he's quite got the speed to be able to pull that off. I think your best case scenario with him, Pedro, is that they move him into sort of a Ryan Neal role where he becomes a dime cornerback for you in those kind of packages. But I don't see him as being the main backup to Joe. I don't think they would go into a year where they'd have Adams and then Joey Blunt as their main backup to come off the bench. I think they would look to Brendan's point on this, more likely to look for a guy like Abram, more of a known quantity, especially understanding more than ever this next offseason that we've got to build into our plans that Adams is maybe not going to be on the football field next year, that he's just maybe gotten broken up as a player where he's not going to be able to maintain. And we can't just count on having secondhand parts behind him to hopefully get it done at that point. We're going to actually have to address it a little bit more than that. So I like Joey Pedro, but I think his career probably trajectory is as Brendon said a second ago, more of probably just a special teams du jour player, and it's also hard to make
special teams.
He was. It's just hard to make an evaluation too on this Pedro because we didn't see a lot of him this year. I mean, a little bit of preseason playing the safety role, but he didn't do anything incredible in the preseason or anything that really jumped out to you that popped off the tape necessarily. So I like to see coming out of Virginia. He's definitely a guy that, he's got some skills to him, but probably your third stringer as we go into next year to start things out, be it Abram or whoever, Ryan Neal or whoever they maybe look to bring in at that point. Thank you though, Pedro, for the $5 donation. Appreciate all of you guys' donations on the channel tonight. You guys are awesome. So thank you very much. So I think we've kind of looked at this game as we got through the donations here, kind of all the way around in this year of things. I've talked about this also as well with a 9-8 finish in this year and everything. Is this a Super Bowl? Let's just say things do play out a little bit to this next week and we can't quite get through the Niners. Is this a team that if they make the right moves this offseason and stuff, that we see a team that could become a Super Bowl contending team into next year? Or do you still kind of follow along the lines that this is still maybe a 2-year process to get us to where we are really at that state of things?
You're going to have to kill the offseason, but I think it's within reach, right? You got to remake that defensive line. You've got probably to bring in another linebacker. Maybe you need a safety. I don't know. It depends. You got to bring in a couple new offensive linemen, probably get some receiver depth. So you got to kill the offseason, but you have enough picks to make that happen. Now, it might be a little too much to ask a bunch of rookies to lead you to the Super Bowl, but I mean, as much as we all get sick of hearing about 2012, because every year Pete Carroll comes out and says, this year felt like 2012, maybe next year really will feel like 2012, where a lot of young players lead us to greatness, but not the top.
It's a good way of putting it. I think too, let's not forget that Super Bowl team that won, I believe at the time, was the youngest Super Bowl team to ever win as far as their average cumulative age on that team. And I think that there is a little bit of, again, we go back to Coach Carroll and what is his wheelhouse? Where is he at his best? And I think younger players versus a little bit of the older players who have been around and heard all the speeches and heard all the rah stuff. Seems like the message resonates best sometimes with those younger guys, almost a little bit before they've been paid on the big contracts and that stuff. And maybe he's back again in his wheelhouse with that a little bit, with all of those draft picks. And let's also remember we do have the money to spend too on top of it. But I agree with you. You're going to need to kill this offseason everywhere. You're going to get almost every move is going to have to be right to get it to a place of being elite. I will say too, the NFC conference doesn't look like it's getting really all that much tougher next year. NFC South doesn't look to be all that much better. The NFC East, maybe the Giants could be better. Maybe Washington. I think Eagles aren't going anywhere, and the Cowboys are always hard to predict either way with it. But we're certainly in, I think, a better position in the NFC to get to being an elite state than we would be if we were in the AFC
Right.
with all the Herberts and Allens and Mahomes, and gets a little dodgy on that side of things. Well, we have got about 2 hours and 45 minutes in here, so we'll kind of put some kind of a bow in on this as far as this season goes. Amazing year, Brendon. We capped it off right. We finished strong. We got in the playoffs. It feels good that this team was able to do this. Hopefully, they can really build this momentum on, and we can make a game of it this week. But it has been absolutely tremendous year for us to be able to watch our Hawks team. It's been a fun year. I think you feel the same way in covering this team, and the ups and downs and ebbs and flows and the dramatics and whatnot have been just so much fun to kind of just pay attention to and kind of keep our eye on with it. So let's see if the dream can kind of continue here, Brendon. Any other kind of final thoughts you've got on anything going on on your end of things?
Yeah. I just really want to stress how successful this season has been, because I think some people, it's easy to lose sight of it sometimes. You get so deep into this one play, this one drive, this one game, this one week. There have only been 10 teams in NFL history that made the playoffs and then picked in the top 10 in the following draft. We are the first team to do it in 17 years.
Jeez.
And I wonder how many of those teams picked in the top 5. That probably has happened less than 5 times in NFL history.
And none had additional second round picks in addition to that, I would guess, in those situations.
So we have the second most draft capital in the league behind, I think, the Houston Texans. And we have this team that I don't know if they're a good team, but they're very close to being good. They're probably 8 or 9 pieces away from being great. And if you really go back, I think, and look at the offseason, if you really go back and look at the offseason that we have, other than the Monet extension, which was always kind of weird, I think every decision we made was at least decent. Like Quandre Diggs, maybe he's a little overpaid, but he's still really good. He's still a good player. Quentin Jefferson took a while to get going, but I mean, for what you're paying, you're probably getting about what he's worth. So we're in good hands right now, it seems to me. I mean, like last offseason, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I strongly believe that Schneider should and will win Executive of the Year.
Mm-hmm. I think he should too.
Yeah, so I think all this to say, not only did this year go as well as anybody could have hoped, but I think we are in good hands for the moment.
We always got to remind ourselves of perspective. Some people will say, well, you Seahawks fans have been spoiled because you've been to the playoffs so many times. You got Super Bowls the last couple of years. So I look at it like that's the standard. And we have a standard set here that we consider ourselves winners. We want to continue to be winners. We don't put up with losing. That's not the standard that's set here. But that also can get you to your point on that lost a little bit on the perspective of the situation and the turnaround that this team has. And the biggest point I think that you made of that, which is that in this offseason, how many moves that you got right, how many different things you did that were the correct moves. I think we could go through the quarterbacks alone, and there's 8 or 9 quarterbacking decisions there of aggressive trades you could have made for different guys that all would have been bad mistakes, that all would have set this franchise back, that all would have removed draft capital. You got all of those right. You mentioned a couple of the 2 fringe guys that you hardly put any money on that were, Monet's whatever, and Jefferson gives you a little bit, but there wasn't any money really put on it. There wasn't really a lot of future commitment put to that. The Uchenna Nwosu signing, which was a little bit of more significant money, is one of the best free agent signings that Schneider has had in his entire time here. Absolutely knocked that one completely out of the park. And, they've earned, with that offseason, I think, Brendon, and those moves they've made, they've earned a little bit of goodwill from us in that respect, not just for the draft, but for how the money was used at that point, especially considering they didn't have a lot of money to spend. And I thought they made hay with where the sun was shining. Even Blythe, who I've not loved, there wasn't a clear answer for you at center, right? You had the $44 million of dead money. There wasn't really a guy in the market. You were worried with Posick and his health because he didn't have that full season. So you looked to find a guy that was scheme specific to this. You tried to get Linderbaum in the draft. Once Linderbaum was off, there wasn't another center to go with. There's a lot of smart decision making here that they made through that process. And again, should earn a lot of goodwill from Seahawks fans, not just now, but into the future. And I think that's a great point on your part, Brendon, is we got to remember the perspective here. Remember where we were on the day of the Wilson trade, when we had many Seahawks fans ready to jump out of their windows and throw themselves to the concrete below because they thought we were headed for a 1990s like dark age, which we're not heading for that. There's no dark age coming anytime soon. We've got a golden, bright, beautiful future set ahead of for us Seahawks fans, including this next week. Well, I want you guys to do me a favor. We got 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, I want you to go onto your YouTube search bar and type in Seahawks Brendon Nelson. That's his channel, Seahawks Brendon Nelson over there. He does great daily content, sometimes dual daily content. So he is all on it over there doing the great hard work. So please do that. Hit that like button here on this video if you could for me. If you haven't already, it does help this channel and helps me grow considerably. And hey, get subscribed over here to this channel too. If you haven't already, I would really appreciate it. We're on the road here to 11,000 subs if we can get there, a couple hundred away. So we're trying to get around to the other side of that baby here before the end of the year if we can pull that one off. Probably a little aggressive, but I would love to see it. You're about to push up to 12, aren't you? You're almost
I'm more than halfway there.
There we go.
Well, from 11,000 at least. So I think I'm at like 11,600. I didn't think I was going to get there this month, but then we made the playoffs, and it's like, well,
The playoff
that
bump, baby.
helps.
Playoff bump. Playoff bump. It does help, man. You can only wonder what happened if you had a Super Bowl run on where the channel would go at that point, huh? As far as
Right.
the level of action on that. So, hey, we never know, man. Brendon, look, I'm going to dream. I'm going to dream, man. It's 4 games. I know we don't have a chance. Everyone's saying, oh, you guys are lucky. Oh, we need the Detroit. Oh, Niners are such a juggernaut. How could you have to any hope? Oh, you got to go to Niners. And the Niner fans, man, they're getting a little too confident for me. They've already got this as a W down. They're not even the least bit worried on this one. I like our chances. Let's let this flow, Brandon. Let's see where this goes, man. You know, it's all house money at this point, as somebody said on my stream. We got house money. So let's throw it to the middle of the table. Let's see what happens this week. You and I will be back on your side of it at 8 o'clock Thursday on Seahawks Brendon Nelson's channel. We'll be coming back to preview this matchup in full with San Francisco. So please do go over to his channel there to get prepped for that. Other than that, though, folks, thank you so much for all of the donations here on the channel today. Appreciate so much of the support you guys do to both me and Brendon Nelson's channel. It is awesome. You guys are amazing in every respect in that measure of things. Hey, the odds are long, Brendon. They're saying we don't have a chance. So, sorry, one more donation here. Hold on. $5 dono from Voodoo Magic. Thank you, Voodoo. I appreciate it, man. It says, great show, guys. If Russ was still a Hawk this year, do we still make the playoffs?
Yeah, not even close. I think we have like 5 wins. Denver had an elite defense and only won 5 games.
Yeah, Voodoo. I mean, there was a point this year at one point where if Denver had just scored 18 points a game over a span of like the first 10 or 11 games, they would have been 9-1, 10-1. He couldn't get him to 18 points. The thought process that he would do that here or that he would be so much more remarkably better here than he was in Denver, I don't agree with. I think that he had been showing you over the last year and a half this regression that only just continued through, right? It's just all you saw this year from him in Denver was more of a continuance off of what he had been in Seattle over the prior year and a half. So I don't think he gets there. Our defense was not great this year. It was even worse than it was last year. Yet you had that top 10 offense that Brendon referenced, which was able to offset that and be able to combat it. You could have a scoreagami game where you don't punt once and you win the game 48-45. There's no way that Russell Wilson has that type of game. Not with his boom and bust stuff. You're going to have a couple punts in that game and you're going to lose that particular game. Say nothing of a variety of other ones. No, I don't think that we're even sniffing. I think Brendon, even at 5 wins, might be aggressive with that. I mean, I think we're at we probably carve 5 out. You're right. We probably get 5 out, Voodoo.
Easy schedule, remember.
Easy schedule will get you to 5, but I don't think you're getting into the playoffs with Russell. I don't think he's going to give you what Geno gave you, especially in that first 12 games was, no, I don't think you're getting that from Russ. But thank you, Voodoo. Appreciate you. And we had a great time as always here on the channel with this show. Well, Brendon, they say we don't have great odds in this game. They say we got no chance nationally. They say, Vegas goes, what are we at 10.5 point underdog right now by Vegas? So no one's giving us a chance, Brendon. No one's giving us a chance. And I think some Seahawks fans are already looking at the draft going, well, it was a good ride. At least we got in the playoffs. At least it's over with. I think we got to remind them something. I think we got to let them know about something here. Seahawks Brendon Nelson's channel on the Hawks Nest has got to let you guys know about a little bit something right now. We ain't dead. We in this. We need 4 wins, and we're raising a Lombardi trophy over our head. 4 mere wins in a row. And I know the odds are long and we don't have any chance and all that, but that's why we're going to remind you of something one more out the door. We're just about to leave because we aren't going to let you ever forget. Don't you ever forget out here now. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.